Morning everybody, welcome to the Strategic and Corporate Select Committee. It's Wednesday the 11th of February 2026. I'm Councillor Dan Roper, Chair of the Strategic and Corporate Select Committee. I'd like to welcome you all to this meeting. This meeting is being held in person at County Hall and is also being streamed live on the County Council's YouTube channel. A fire alarm test is not expected during this meeting. If the alarm sounds, we must evacuate County Hall. In the event of an emergency, please make your way to the nearest exit and meet at the muster point located on the main car park. Under the Council's protocol on the use of media equipment at meetings held in public, this meeting may be filmed, recorded or photographed. Anyone wishing to do so must inform me and ensure that it is done in a way that is clearly visible to everyone present. The wishes of the individual not to be recorded or filmed must be appropriately respected. Okay, item 1 is apologies for absence, please.
Thank you, Chair. We have apologies today from Councillor Carl Anderson, who is substituted by Councillor Daniel Elmer. Councillor Lana Hempsall, substituted by Councillor Robert Savage. Councillor Mark Kiddle-Morris, substituted by Councillor Greg Peck. And Councillor Carl Smith. Councillor Julie Brochek-Colton was also supposed to be in attendance for the call-in item. She has sent her apologies for this meeting. And also apologies from Councillor Stuart Clancy, who was going to be a substitute as well.
Just a query, Chairman. If a member of a committee fails to give apologies or turn up at consecutive meetings, question A, are they representing their electorate democratically? And B, if they don't turn up, does the 6-month rule apply to committees?
My understanding of the 6-month rule does not apply to individual committees. It's to meetings as a whole across the council. I'm aware of the member of the committee you're talking about. I will reach out to that member of the committee and to see if he will be attending future meetings. You never know, he might still make an appearance. Okay, welcome to our substitutes today, Councillor Elmer, Councillor Peck and Councillor Savage. I hope you have an enjoyable meeting. Okay, item number 2 is minutes of the meeting on Wednesday the 21st of January 2026. Are we content that they are a true and accurate record? Agreed, thank you. Just on the point of the minutes, just a couple of pieces of housekeeping on there. An item was raised on 7.3 of those minutes about the power to convene meetings. The monitoring officer has done her homework on that and has advised that that power to convene meetings sits with the chair of the committee, provided adequate notice is given so that papers can be issued. So we've done that bit of housekeeping. And on item 8.4, with regard to company's governance, in terms of the first meeting of the chairs of the relevant committees for the working group, that has been arranged for next Friday, so that matter is in train. Okay, item number 3 is updates from the chair. The only announcement I have is that we will have a reordering of the business today. What I propose to do is to take the call-in item first on the agenda. Secondly, then take the fire and rescue service item. Then we will have a cup of tea, and then we'll do the budget item. So we'll do things in a nice ordered way if committee are content. Item number 4, do we have any declarations of interest, please, members? Councillor Peck.
Yes, I'd just like to declare an interest. I am the County Council representative on the Board of North.
Thank you, Councillor Peck. I'm just going to look to the monitoring officer. Does that affect anything, monitoring officer?
No, it's not a pecuniary interest. Obviously, Councillor Peck sits on that board as a representative of the council, not as an individual, and doesn't make any financial benefit therefrom. Sorry.
Thank you for that. Okay, item 5. Oh, sorry, Councillor Morphew.
Yes, Chair, I would like to declare that I campaigned to keep Berman House open last year. I don't think that's a prejudicial interest, but I wanted to declare it.
Thank you. I don't think that is. Thank you. Councillor Morphew.
Yes, sorry, Chair, and apologies to Councillor Peck, and this is absolutely not intended as any comment on your integrity, so let me say that. In terms of that declaration of interest as a shareholder director, clearly Councillor Peck has been associated with the decisions that have been made and has been privy to a whole load of confidential information that this committee can't be privy to according to the ruling so far. So I think he's in a position of advantage over the rest of the committee, and I'm struggling with that.
I will look to the monitoring officer.
So the matter to be considered in terms of that kind of issue is whether or not Councillor Peck would be biased or have the appearance of bias in terms of his decision making. I mean, being party to information or otherwise, I mean, many of you are party to different information and you bring that information together. So I guess what the question there is there a risk that Councillor Peck is biased in terms of the decision making around this? I mean, as you're aware, this isn't a decision-making committee as such. You're here to consider the information around the call-in and come to a position. I'm not sure that there is a strong argument at this point, given that it is a council decision that is being considered, an executive decision, that Councillor Peck could be biased in terms of any decision-making due to his relationship with Norse. Thank you.
Thank you, Monitoring Officer. Okay, item number 5 is public question time. There are no public questions received. Item number 6 is local member questions. There are no local member questions received. So on our reordered agenda, item 7 then is the call-in or residential care estate, to be found at page 565 on your agenda. And we have a report in front of us from the Director of Strategic Finance, the Director of Property and the Director of Strategic Commissioning and Market Development. Can I welcome Councillor Jones to the meeting, who is one of the call-in members, alongside Councillor Morphew, who of course is a member of this committee. Can I also welcome that on this item we will be hearing from Councillor Andrew Jameson, Cabinet Member for Finance, Ian Wake, the Executive Director of Adult Social Services, Harvey Bullen, the Director of Strategic Finance, Tysus Adam, the Assistant Director of Finance, and Simon Hughes, the Director of Property. Can I just remind members in advance of this item of the procedure for handling a call-in, in that members are only able to discuss the issues raised in the call-in notice and not go beyond that. The callers in will be allocated 10 minutes to introduce their call-in and to speak to the issues raised in their call-in notice. Supporting contributors may also speak, but this will count within that 10-minute limit. The Cabinet Member alongside the supporting officers will then be allocated 10 minutes to respond to the issues raised by the caller in, and the committee will then be invited to ask questions. It will be interesting as far as Councillor Morphew is concerned, because he is a caller in but also a member of the committee. He won't be able to ask questions to himself, but certainly he will not be restricted in any way in terms of asking questions to the officers or the Cabinet members, as he is a member of the committee. Once the committee has asked their questions, both the callers in and the Cabinet member and officers will be invited to sum up their case, and each will have 5 minutes. And at that stage, we will then go over to the committee to invite proposals or further discussion. And I'll advise what we can do at that stage of the meeting. So at this point, Councillor Hopper Mr. Hopper will go down to the timing machine to make sure that we're all completely within our limits. And once he is in place, we will start the call-in process. So thank you. If I could hand over then, please, to Councillors Jones and Morphew, please, to introduce your call-in.
Thank you, Chair. Before I actually start the calling, can I give apologies? I think we've already heard from Councillor Broshett-Colton and Councillor Walker, both of whom are unwell, unfortunately. And Councillor Sands, somebody's pretty much totaled his car and he's got to sort that out, so you have to feel for him. Anyway, moving on to the call-in and the grounds for the call-in, it won't come as any surprise to the committee that I don't agree with the decision of Cabinet on a residential care estate. However, that's not the reason for this call-in. The fact that we don't agree with something is not sufficient grounds. What the call-in is about is a profound sense of concern about how this decision has been arrived at and taken. If you look around the room, there are a number of officers and members privy to confidential information. This committee is not, and the governance panel has not been provided with all the confidential information. The monitoring officer advises us on the member protocol. We had that circulated yesterday, and I'm sure that you would have seen the exchanges. Whilst, to be honest, I respectfully disagree with her interpretation, very respectfully. The Cabinet member said that the local member protocol had been followed. We were all sitting, most of us were sitting in this chamber when she said it. It hadn't been, but I believe that she thought that it had and was of the view that it should have been. The financial regulations also informs the reputation and makes it clear, if you're looking for it in the Constitution, it's page 282, local members should be involved in property transactions. Never in my years on this council have I ever encountered a retrospective interpretation designed to restrict member involvement in issues on their patch. Certainly not at this scale. If we agree with this interpretation, we set a precedent we will regret. Now, even though we haven't got all of our colleagues here today, and we have got something from each of them just to add a flavour to the local member concerns about not being involved, not being involved as far as the local member protocol goes. And so I'm going to ask Brenda if she will come in and let the committee know what that is.
Thank you. Councillor Colleen Walker said, my residents expect me to know what's going on and to be able to tell Cabinet what my residents' views are before they make decisions that affect them and their community. Locally, we are very proud of that care home, those who live there and those who work there. It's part of our community. And now to be told after so many years in the council, I have no right to be listened to when the Cabinet is making a decision that affects my community is outrageous. I don't expect Cabinet to agree with me, but I do expect them to give my community and me as their councillor the right to be heard and to take account of those views. This decision was taken with no involvement from me whatsoever, and I ask for Cabinet to look again and take account of the views of all those councillors and communities before deciding. Councillor Mike Sands said, Mayflower is a jewel in the crown for Norwich and Norfolk. It was opened with a real fanfare and has become a fixture in our community, much loved and a source of local employment. My residents are confused by this decision and how little I and they have been told about it or had a chance to express their views about its future. They want to be consulted, and I want the right to put their views forward before a decision like this is made. Councillor Brochett-Colton said, Mountfield is much valued, and I have had residents ask me what the future of those who lived there is to be. I can't properly answer that question, or the question, how did we get to this point? I think this needs to be put right by the Cabinet, and decisions that they take should be informed by the views of councillors representing local opinion.
Thank you. If I can turn now to the basis of making the decision. Decisions in this council are required to be soundly based on evidence. This is a decision in principle to dispose of a failing care estate that in 2019 was a thriving business, high quality, profitable and well regarded by the CQC. By 2024 it had become unprofitable and the transformation programme had stalled. The governance in the original contract had suddenly and still inexplicably disappeared in 2019. And again, you will have seen the exchange with the monitoring officer yesterday, which still leaves us in the dark. Governance required any home closure to be considered by the contractually required liaison committee before going to Cabinet as part of a business plan. There's no equivalent successor body with the same contractual requirement, so there has been no sign-off for the closures so far, no scrutiny of the decline of the care estate, no explanation of any reasonable kind, and therefore none of the lessons have been recorded or reported as evidence to justify the proposals Cabinet has now approved in principle. How on earth can a decision be made without being clear what went wrong before? It is noticeable so much has gone below the line. And yes, I accept there is a lot of commercially sensitive material, but I dispute to my last breath that the policy that underpins the decisions and the evidence for it can be considered commercially sensitive. A note to the decision to delegate to officers. The Constitution requires delegated decisions to be recorded and reported. Reported decisions can be subject to call-in. However, there is no constitutionally required reporting process, despite the requirement. I question the appropriateness of the decision without clarification of how members will be advised of and able to challenge this decision, Now, I've previously raised questions about recording and reporting in this committee in this room, which has resulted, but to no avail. And that's resulted, for example, in a 14-year highway contract being let under delegated authority on the basis of an agreement in principle by Cabinet and no further scrutiny. I don't want to see that happen again here. So what exactly is this decision trying to achieve? Councillor Jameson regularly says investment, but I'm unclear what that actually means because it looks to me like a sell-off more than anything else, not investment. The proposed buyer involves a network of companies with care and property interests that are perfectly set up to cherry-pick the going concerns, sell off or close those they don't want in their portfolio, close and sell any unsuitable buildings to invest in upgrades should they want to do that. But if they can do that, why can't this council? And whether or not we decided to do it, why haven't we looked at the option? And that option wasn't included in the report, nor has it been looked at by members, nor have any other options that I can see been looked at, because if they had, we would have had him here today before us, and I would have been almost certainly commenting on them now. In fact, there's no evidence at all that anything else had been looked at. But surely an absolute for looking at what investment would be necessary and making a decision on whether or not we could invest would be to assess the condition of the existing estate. I've asked for a copy of the council condition surveys on each of the properties. There aren't any. So on what basis was a decision made? External auditors reported that the sale would be used to pay down loans from the council to Norse. Now, this hasn't been mentioned anywhere else, but it is sufficient for external audit to include it in their narrative. So tell me what the real purpose of investment is. Is it about investment? Is it about paying down? Is it about choosing an option when other options have not been looked at? I think the clarity of what is trying to be achieved here is absolutely unclear, and that's one of the key grounds for the calling. Add to that the absence of evidence for the reason why the contract failed, and we have a very muddy picture that leads to an unhappy decision in principle with no clear sense of purpose, no clear outcomes, and none of that is informed by local people or councillor views. What this call-in seeks to do is not try to overturn the decision. That will happen elsewhere. But what we want is to refer it back to get clarity, to open the opportunity to look again at potentially other options and get local members' views on what would be best, together with what emerges from local government review announcements. There are lessons to be learnt from the failure of the contract with Norse that comes to an end in March. We have to learn those for the sake of this council, successor councils, and for the care that we're delivering. The decision that we've got at the moment, the way the decision has been taken, the evidence to use that decision, doesn't actually do any of those jobs. And I think we should be saying very clearly to the Cabinet that that's a prerequisite before you make a decision like this. Now, it's a decision in principle which suggests...
Councillor Moore, if you're reaching time up, I'm going to give you a bit of time to wind up.
Thank you. The fact that it's a decision in principle suggests that there is a way to go yet. That means that we could rewind the clock sufficiently to be able to do this job without impeding progress towards clearly needing to resolve an issue, because we've got the contract running out at the end of March. But I think it's a job that's worth doing, it's worth referring back, it's worth having another look and making sure we get this right. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, the next stage of the process is to turn to the Cabinet member and officers for their reply. Over to you. Who is going to go first? Councillor Jameson. Over to you, Councillor Jameson.
I'll go first, Chair. Thank you very much indeed. On one level, I welcome this call-in because it highlights a clear political choice. You've got Councillor Morphew's ideological view that we, the residents of Norfolk, have to rely on some with-ate whereas, of course, we believe that it is the private sector that can provide the investment, the innovation, the delivery capacity that is needed to sustain vital services in this area over the next 30 years. However, rather than face that head-on, Councillor Morphew says he doesn't agree with the principle, but we are left having to deal with a series of, in my opinion, backward-looking call-in statements that are utterly misleading, and I will deal with them in due course. First, however, it is important to remind ourselves that we, Norfolk County Council, are doing to transform elderly care in Norfolk. The transformation of North Care's residential state should be seen as part of adults' sufficiency needs discussed at the same meeting, and also the hugely popular independent living programme, the latest of which in South Wootton in Kings Lynn, is being opened by my colleague Alison Thomas today. So this is not change for change's sake. It is about meeting our statutory duties, protecting our residents and ensuring that adult social care in Norfolk is sustainable, is affordable and is fit for the future. The contract and responsible point to step back and ask three fundamental questions. Are the homes able to deal with the complexity of current care needs, which are so different now than from the needs as perceived in 2010? Are we meeting our Care Act sufficiency duties, and are we delivering value for money for residents and taxpayers? And the honest answer is that the current model cannot continue unchanged. We all know how much the world has changed in the past 10, let alone 15 years. And whether that is around subsidy control legislation or around the changing needs answered on one hand by the 1,135 new affordable specialist housing that we're building across this county, or on the other hand by specialist care increasingly provided by specialist providers. Following the creation of North Care, a start was made to transform the care estate. 3 new homes were built, Mayflower, Mountfield and Lydia Eva. However, as colleagues know, the company pivoted with great acclaim from this council to deal with COVID and the aftermath of that pandemic. Rocketing interest rates and the war in Ukraine has meant that the company could not afford to continue redevelopment, and it was that and not some misguided conspiracy theory about committees ceasing to meet, which is what really Councillor Morphew is reduced to talking about, that meant that this transformation cannot be carried on. Most of the rest of the estate was built decades ago. It was in response to what was then deemed the solution of standard residential care. The rooms are small, they lack en-suite facilities, the layouts are outdated, and crucially, many homes struggle to meet the needs of residents that are now more complex. North Care itself has made clear that continuing under the existing arrangements would require very significant capital investment by the council at a time when our resources are under extreme pressure. Even Councillor Morphew has to recognise this. Indeed, on other occasions, he has castigated council for borrowing too much. Also, it must be remembered that while the North Group is a wholly owned company, it operates under statutory fiduciary duties as a board. Those duties require directors to act in the best interest of the company as a going concern, to protect solvency and liquidity, and to take timely decisions where a service or contract is no longer financially sustainable. Those duties are not overridden by political preference or committee processes. Given that context, in June 25, Cabinet previously agreed a clear set of principles to guide all decision-making, and these principles matter because they shape every recommendation in front of us. There are 3 strategic themes. Transform the estate into a modern, fit-for-purpose accommodation. Ensure value for money for adult social care, and ensure value for money for residents. And underpinning those themes are some non-negotiables. Sufficiency of care places must actively inform every decision. Value for money must be demonstrable. Decisions must align with council policy, with law and with governance, and everything must operate within real-world constraints of funding, of workforce and of legislation. These principles are not abstract. They are applied directly in all the proposals ever taken to Cabinet on this issue. And taken together, remember that there were reports in August 24, November 24, in June 25, which explicitly go through very clearly what the process and what the strategy, the long-term strategy is. And given the recognition that to take the care portfolio to where it's needed to be was initially stopped by COVID and then made impossible for a publicly owned care company due to rapidly rising interest rates and a war-induced spiralling construction costs, the proposal to use the end of Northcare's contract to objectively examine options was a wholly responsible action. We ran a full open market process. It was led by Cushman & Wakefield, one of the UK's leading healthcare property advisors. Over 20 parties expressed interest, put forward proposal, and after a rigorous multi-stage process involving adult social care, involving finance, property, procurement, Northcare, Stowe Healthcare has emerged as the preferred bidder. Crucially, Stowe aligns with all our 3 strategic themes and all the details that are going to follow. There is, as Councillor Morphew says, a lot to go through yet. Detailed due diligence has still got to happen, engagement with residents and families. But it was very important. We're accused of keeping unnecessary stuff in the exempt papers, quite the reverse, in my opinion. We came out first and foremost with who the preferred bidder was. We did that because we act, as we always act, in the interests of our residents, in the interests of our staff, so there is transparency into what our plans are and how they're going to go ahead. But any final agreement will obviously acquire the appropriate financial sign-off. And governance. It's a complex, it's a sensitive decision, but it's the right one. It protects existing residents, it secures sufficiency, it modernises an ageing estate, it improves value for money and reduces long-term financial risk to the council. And above all, it reflects our responsibility to plan ahead. And I think that I hope I've made it clear in this brief overview that the strategy has been well planned out. It's a complicated, multifaceted operation, but it is one that we have thought about carefully. And it is, as Councillor Morphew knows, as indeed you all know, Norse is now a well-managed company. It delivers services to local authorities that, in Norfolk, is on an open book, minimal profit basis. But there are not the super profits to be built up in that way to create the reserves necessary to undertake the 80 million plus modernisation of the portfolio, and therefore this is the obvious way forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Jameson, and well within time. Are there any of the officers who wish to use the minute that's left? I see stirring. I don't see any hands up, so we'll move on from that stage of the meeting. Then we're now members into the questions stage. I see Councillor Kemp and Councillor Long. Any others wish to raise their hands at this stage? Councillor Price, thank you. I'm going to trump you though and just ask a couple first myself, and it's one each. Both firstly to the callers in is. You've stated that your objective here is not to seek to overturn the Cabinet decision, but you are looking for further clarity. My question to you is that can that clarity be achieved, or how can it be achieved, without the need to actually refer the decision back to the Cabinet?
Frankly, having listened to Councillor Jameson, I think you've got your answer. And he's taken it, I'm just kind of gobsmacked by saying that this is somehow or another an ideological attack on him, and the withered state is having a go at him. Come on. We're in the scrutiny committee, not in some knockabout here. I would be very happy with the idea that we had an open process where members were more involved. The reality is that whilst Councillor Jameson is right that a number of reports have been taken to Cabinet, most of the useful information which would inform debates has been exempt. So most councillors haven't seen it. I've seen some of it because I've shown my need to know. I think all councillors ought to have more information. There is some which is clearly commercial, I always acknowledge that, but there is clearly some which ought to be in the public domain. Now, if we could find a way of opening it up and taking it forward and making sure that members and residents got a view before the decision was taken, or even before the decision in principle was confirmed, or that we had a way of challenging the decision when it was made, then I would feel more reassured. But the way the decision has been taken, the agreement in principle, and without the recording and reporting process, means that all of a sudden one day we could wake up and discover that the contracts have been signed, and it would be too late. So I see no other way other than to refer it back. If somebody comes up with another way forward, then I'm all ears.
Thank you. And I said I'd have one each, didn't I? Just to Councillor Jameson then, one of the key elements in the call-in is about consultation with local members and questions about the local member protocol. What's your understanding in terms of what consultation or with local members, what could that have potentially added to the process as far as the decisions which have been made?
I will refer to the monitoring officer in relation to the details of the local member protocol. I believe it was followed. I cannot see how there would have been any substantial difference if it is incorrect and it is correctly and it was not followed appropriately. But frankly, there would have been the option for members to feed into cabinet prior to the decision, which wasn't taken up. I don't know whether the monitoring officer has anything else to add in relation to the local member protocol.
I'll hand over to you, monitoring officer, whilst you still have your voice.
Thank you. I mean, all I have to add is in my view, the local member protocol was followed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That's enough from me for now. Councillor Kemp, please.
Thank you, Chair. And I would like to speak to the part of the call-in where the Constitution requires there should be an evidence-based business case for major decisions.
So just not wanted to cut across you, Councillor Kemp.
Yes.
A stage of questions at this
yes.
stage. So, if you could
so my
make
question
sure
is about the long-term financial risks of this decision. Compared to the fact that we're an organisation with a 1.077 billion capital budget, an authorised borrowing limit of 1.25 billion, and we're going to borrow 97 million this year in the capital budget. But it's been seen that this would not be advantageous for us to borrow for the care homes, and yet the risks of a private firm borrowing to build up the estate and transform it. Is this not going to be more money because we would have access to prudential borrowing and a private firm would have to go to the banks, and therefore the risk of the raising of care home fees for our residents? Now, I know that there would be an agreement whereby people that have been placed by the local authority would have their fees at a particular level, but surely this might lead to extra burden upon privately funded, self-funded residents. Money would run out more quickly, and then they might need to be funded by us. And of course, our model for social care for children is to bring residential placements in-house because it's better value. So this is the opposite of what we are arguing for that. And the risks are that we might incur more expenses for the local authority, and we would not be able to afford to place people. Residents might not be able to afford care home fees. This is a huge issue because Norfolk has lower house prices, so equity can be exhausted sooner. We have low wages. This could cause horrendous problems for our residents, and the fact that Norse does so much around the country. We have at least 44 companies doing all sorts of things from cleaning and waste management and school meals. And that's around the country. But in Norfolk, it seems as if we're just not taking care of our own properly. If we could allow our own company, our wholly owned company, to run away from the care market in Norfolk. How have all these risks been considered? Because residents are relying on us. Our most vulnerable residents and their families and their carers are relying on us to get this right.
Thank you. Some of the examples strayed away from the call-in then, but I think the fundamental question is around the risks and around clarity around the Cabinet decision. Over to you, Councillor Jameson.
Thank you, Councillor Kemp. And I sought in my introduction to clarify some of the concerns that were expressed in the papers, in the call-in relation to clarity of vision, simply by going through precisely what the process has been. That process will, I think, assure you that we have considered risks in relation to a number of different points there. But I think I'm going to call on Harvey to talk specifically on the finance for the council, but the finance for the companies concerned. Clearly, we have done the due diligence on the financial backing of Stowe. The backers there are an extremely significant company, and it will be one of the major players in this sector. The overall, of course, in Norfolk, Norse Care was a significant but by no means majority provider of care. There are a great many independent firms offering good care, and that will continue to be the case. As you so rightly say, our due diligence is ensuring that those in care at the minute will see their fees capped. Those who are under whose fees are paid for by the council, and we are, of course. It also states in the papers, and it's important to read the papers in full to get the full idea of the picture, that we are we're going out for a block contract as we speak. I think that answers most of the questions. Do you want to just talk about the finance side?
Thank you. In terms of the money side of it, yes, the County Council does have a large capital programme. Significant elements of that are funded by external borrowing, and in addition, some of that funding that we get is for specific services. Where you get to is that the County Council has made decisions to use its capital investment and borrowing in regard to the independent living schemes, and by definition, money is a finite resource, and it means that the scope to continue borrowing is limited. And I think Councillor Jameson referred to that in his introduction, is there are choices here, and the choices will come around of what you want to do with the available resources, and the council has made its decision to invest in adult social care in terms of independent living schemes. In addition to that, you also have to bear in mind that just because the County Council owns Norse, the County Council also has to still comply with subsidy control. So it cannot, and neither the monitoring officer or I would allow this to happen, just to give money to Norse to invest in care homes, because the market, and there is a market in the in this area, would quite rightly say that you are subsidising your own company, and you can't do that. So it is not a simple, straightforward exercise of just saying, making a decision to say we want to invest in care homes. It is something that you need to, the County Council would need, if Norse was still to run the care homes, to ensure that it receives a proper financial return back from Norse for that investment, and that would require certain processes to go through. But to come back to what Councillor Jameson was saying earlier, the June Cabinet report highlighted that the Norse Board had made a decision that they wished to remove themselves from the residential care market. Therefore, the County Council was set to respond to that, and there were options considered in that June 25 paper, one of which was around, and it did talk around, the financing required to invest in the estate. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll look back to Councillor Kemp. Is there anything you feel hasn't been answered?
I would like to know more about the subsidy control issue, because surely there would be an option for us to bring the care homes back in-house as they used to be, and we then had the issue that we were training people, it's easy to retain people, we'd have even higher standards. Can we have more information about subsidy control? Because I understood that there are some exemptions for that.
I'm going to ask for a brief reply on that because I think we are straying from the recall.
I'm sure that can be given to you, Councillor Kemp, but I mean, I think that you ignore the fundamental point, which is the £80 million plus that would be required to rejuvenate the state is simply not available to this council. It is not good value for money. It does not provide residents with the best outcomes.
Thank you. I'm going to move on. Councillor Long, please.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Just a bit confused. Within the call-in, it specifically makes reference to the local member protocol was not followed. That was one of the points that was highlighted in red in the agenda. We just heard from the monitoring officer earlier that she thought that the local member protocol had been followed or wasn't needed in regard. Now, the bit that confuses me, and I'll probably have a question to those that called in, if that's okay. You've got a care home currently run by Norse. You're going to have a care home run by somebody else. The care home is still the care home, not proposing. Now, I can't see where there would need to be consultation in that process because, yes, the provider is changing, but we don't consult with all the public when we change the bin collection on the districts from one operator to another. They expect a seamless service and things to work correct. Now, in this instance, previous to this coming about, I was consulted under the local member protocol about the care home, one of which was shut. And so I feel that, that process did happen in that case. I was informed as the local member, the call, about homes that weren't having any changes. Obviously, if there were homes that were due to be closed as part of this process, obviously I would obviously appreciate that probably the local member ought to be, as happened to me some months previous with Berman House. Thank you.
Thank you. And were that the case, that there weren't going to be any changes, then I'm sure the local members would have been reassured because they would have been able to ask a whole series of questions about any concerns that they had. And if they aren't having proposals put to them so that they can test them out, even if there aren't going to be any changes, when you know full well that they're likely to be controversial because it is a change of ownership and a move away from the public sector to the private sector, then local members are bound to be concerned. What we will absolutely know is that their residents, both those who are residents of the homes and those who are in the community, will be asking questions. Now, yes, they will get answers from other places, but they will be looking to their elected representatives too, to represent their views, to try and get answers, to make sure that things are okay. And as I said, throughout my time, I've been on this council for 13 years, one of the things that I have held dear, and I think most others on the council do too, is the fact that we get talked to, and we get quite shirty when we don't get talked to about major issues that are affecting our area, whether or not they're going to be significant in terms of what the changes of the outcome or just the process that it's going through. And this is an important process. Now, the cabinet member in here clearly thought that the local member protocol had been followed. In fact, she was wrong, because what had been followed was the media protocol. So councillors had been sent a copy of what was going to the media on the day that it went to the media, which was about the day that, I can't remember, it was the day of or the day before the announcements were made. But certainly the actual requirement wasn't from paragraph 10D of the Constitution, the local member protocol, wasn't followed. Now, the monitoring officer has questioned whether or not it was around a delegated decision, whatever. But when you look at the financial regulations in the Constitution, this is the financial regulations, so this is kind of the upper tier Constitution, if you like, it says, the council's named and designated corporate property officer, director of property, may, in accordance with arrangements approved by the director of strategic finance, dispose of property assets, acquire property assets, and approve of property transactions as set out in tables 813.6 and 513.6, 513.7 below. Now, I think we would all agree that that would fall within that kind of criteria. Proposals for disposals, acquisitions, and other property transactions must involve the local member as set out in the local member protocol in the Constitution, Part D, 10D of the Constitution. There is a constitutional requirement when there are those sorts of property requirements, those sorts of property proposals, to consult members under the local member protocol. It didn't happen. If it did, we wouldn't be arguing about it today.
Thank you. Back to you, Councillor Long.
Thank you. And I've got a not dissimilar question for the our Director of Adult Social Care. Within the proposed changes from the current regime to the new regime, is there anything within the contractual arrangements that you have any concern about regarding the care or provision of care homes across our estate, and more importantly, to the individuals whose homes we are considering?
Thank you. In terms of the move from current to future state, obviously the current state is not fit for purpose in many circumstances. So, yeah, we have a duty under the Care Act to ensure sufficiency. The sufficiency paper that was considered by Cabinet alongside the paper that's been called in set out a really clear process with two key criteria, one about existing residents and ensuring that their care continues and continues at the same rate, and that they're allowed to stay where they are. And then secondly, a open book procurement process around ensuring future sufficiency, and we will do that in parallel with this process. Should that not provide adequate sufficiency, we would look for other arrangements to ensure it. We would hope that the preferred bidder would preferred provider would bid in terms of that, but that's a matter for them. It will be an open book, but we would reserve the right to maybe take some homes out of the deal if we couldn't ensure sufficiency. Cabinet, I think, has been really clear about that criterion. Thank you.
One more.
That's really helpful. So we're going from a situation which the Director himself says there are, less than a perfect scenario, to an improved scenario, yet members are expecting to be consulted on the fact that things are going to get better. And I would have thought that we often find that we have call-ins when, the sort of scrutiny process is in some way lacking. But I mean, in terms of what's the aspirational within the Adults Select Committee and within what the portfolio is trying to do, this is only proposing improvement, and normally you get consulted when things are going to go, the other way round. So that part
I'm not
of
sure where the question is coming, Councillor Long.
I'm just trying to get this right in my own head, Chairman, because we're asked to weigh up a call-in, part of which is based on local member protocol, but from the explanation that I've had, and I was a ward member who's had a care home closed in my division, and I was consulted about that process because, kind of needed to know. But I don't think if somebody said to me, we're going to change who the operator is of that care home and it'll stay open and the people that are coming in are going to invest money into it and make it up to spec and, it's going to be so much better than it was. Yes, it would have been nice to know with everybody else that that's happening. And that's, I think, what happened. I mean, everybody got consulted in that. But specifically, did I need to know it about? No, because it's happening to all of them. And that, I just don't see how we can accept that part of the call-in as being under consideration when, it's for everyone across the whole piece, and there's improvements proposed in what's coming. I can see the point of a media release to tell all councillors before it hits the paper press. But
I'm going to stop you there. As far as thinking out loud, I'll ask members to do that quietly to themselves on that. But I will add on to your points there, Councillor Morphew. Do you agree? In order to make it actually a question, so that Councillor Morphew can answer the point.
No, I don't agree, and with all due respect to Brian, oh, come on. I mean, of course you get consulted when things are going to improve. Do you not get consulted on road schemes and road improvements, for example? Of course you do. And that's what you'd expect. Well, if you don't in King's Lynn, then you need to...
Councillor Long,
yeah,
behave.
Sorry.
Over to you, Councillor.
I apologise for responding to the noises off. Of course we get consulted on improvements as well as detriments. We get consulted on things that roll on, but there are changes in it that people are concerned about. The point of councillors is that we make decisions about what are improvements, what are detriments, what we're concerned about. And we talk to our residents about that. It's our choice what we think is right and wrong and how we take things up. Now, what I don't think is ever going to be right and ever, I hope, going to be acceptable to this or any other council is that we get told that because somebody else thinks it's an advantage, we don't get told about it or the opportunity to be consulted. I think that's thin to the point of being, no, I won't be rude. I'll leave it at that.
I'm grateful to you for not being rude. Okay, thank you. I'm going to take Councillor Price as we're in the questions phase on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a total of 3 questions for this. I would just like to remind everyone in the chamber that we are talking about elderly people, okay? And when I was visiting my grandmother before she passed, it struck me how vulnerable and scared a lot of these people are, okay? And so I just hope that we can keep that in our mind when we're responding to each other. Although I've got 3 questions, Chair, I do want to pick up the point that was raised by Councillor Morphew in response regarding the high-level part of the Constitution and around the member protocol, where he's referenced that local members must be consulted when we're talking about Director of Property Finance, and we had an earlier response from the monitoring officer, which was a one-line answer that believed the member protocol was followed. So this additional question is, can I have clarity around the point that Councillor Morphew has made, that in the Constitution it says it must consult local members?
I'm going to put that to the monitoring officer.
So if I find the section of the Constitution to which, this is now going to get a little bit into the detail, I'm afraid. Councillor Morphew, could I have a section of the Constitution that you were reading from, please? The property financial regulations?
It was on page 282, if that helps.
282, thank you very much.
It's buried in the financial regulations, which are a little difficult to pick your way through.
So what it says is the proposals for disposals, acquisitions and other property transactions must involve the local member as set out within the local member protocol in the Constitution, Part 10D of the Constitution. When we go to Part 10D of the Constitution, there's a big list about all the things in which we involve the local members in. There isn't the word consult in there. So I think what we've got here is a kind of different interpretation between members of what is that level of engagement or involvement, as we say here. Is it enough to send it, or does there need to be a consultation? My position, having seen the list and the different wording through here, is that it was sent to those members and therefore they were involved, but clearly it's the members' constitution. So if one wanted to clarify that point within the Constitution, I'd of course leave it open to members of this council to consider as such. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate the answer, and I think that rings loudly in this chamber of a weak constitution or a lack of real democratic accountability. But I accept the point that the monitoring officer has made. To move to my questions, I guess this kind of moves over to Councillor Jameson and officers. Okay, and so this first question is on sort of democratic oversight and transparency, really. So, I wrote this down. So, given that this decision involves the transfer and sale of 17 council-owned freeholds and a major shift in how we provide care for our most vulnerable, why was this policy developed behind closed doors and without the involvement of non-cabinet members until after an in-principle deal was already reached effectively bypassing the democratic scrutiny of this committee. And that's for Councillor Jameson.
We'll take them one at a time. Yeah. Yes, please, Councillor Jameson.
Yeah, I can answer that. Well,
could
short
you
answer to that, Councillor Price, is that it's the Cabinet who is the administration, not this committee, and so it is the decisions taken by Cabinet, and the point is that they were taken in a transparent and multi-phase basis. The Cabinet approved the approach to market testing and transformation. They did that in June 2025. We announced that going to market on an all-inquiries basis. We announced existing that Norse Care were exiting the care market. We announced that we were going to tender with the housing with care contracts. We've had an independent living contract in place since 2018-19. I would certainly push back hard on a lack of democratic accountability and indeed on the concept that we have developed these schemes behind closed doors. I think that the papers are there for anyone to read, and it is, as I've said before, a complicated, multifaceted strategy that we're putting in place for our elderly, and thank you very much for reminding us, Councillor Price, what it is that we are fundamentally talking about here, and which is the best possible care for the elderly in Norfolk over the next 30 years, and that is what I am focused on. I'm not focused on which committee did what where. This is the fundamental thing, and I think that it's the fundamental strength of the policies that we have put before you, before Cabinet today, and is of course subject to due diligence, and it is an in-principle decision at this stage.
Thank you. I'll move on to my second question. I appreciate the answer, and it does feel that it, and I respect that it is a cabinet decision. I do respect that, but I do feel that it dwarfs the importance of any of these scrutiny-based committees, which are here to represent a wider view of the council than a very closed, small view of a cabinet. So I do feel that when we've not gone through that process of bringing it to this committee, that is a detriment to the decision and doesn't send the right message to the public. Okay, but so this question is on the sort of the true motive of this, and it's the kind of debt versus care. And the call-in highlights a fundamental lack of clarity. Is the primary driver of the sale the improvement of care standards, or is it simply a financial manoeuvre to allow Norse to pay down borrowing to the council? How can we justify selling these public assets when the report fails to specify the actual investment residents will receive from a private buyer? So these residents, when we get this new organisation take over, if and I'll be even more plain, if Norse can't afford to upgrade, why would one of the biggest providers of services up and down the country, one that is close to us in terms of ownership, okay, if it's a bad investment for the one we own and we worry about the one that we are the sole provider that they can't deliver, why on earth do you think that someone else in the market is going to make these improvements? Isn't this just clearly about reducing debt liability to this council overall? And isn't it striking that basically we're going to see a fall in standards of care? Because if Norse can't deliver it, who can?
Well, you'll be unsurprised to know that I would disagree wholeheartedly with the basic premise of that question. Just first of all, scrutiny is a very important committee. I've always felt it to be a very important committee. It had every opportunity, of course, to call in some of the earlier papers that we discussed in the autumn of 2024, in the winter of 2024, and the summer of 2025. There's been there is a suite or a portfolio of papers which has sought to demonstrate what we intend to do and what we want for care for the elderly in this county overall. It is, as Mr. Wake mentioned earlier on, it's based in our sufficiency papers. and that is sort of fundamental to it. In relation to improving care standards or cash, this idea that it's cash, I don't think is it bears scrutiny. I am aware of Councillor Morphew's fixation on the audit committee, but I did notice that the audit papers, I did notice that for some reason the section was missed out from, this is actually from the Labour Group motion, but it covers the points about the auditor and their comments. And I think it's worth bearing in mind that for some reason in the motion they missed out the statement that said, the auditor said, and I'll quote this, that we have considered the oversight of North in the improving economy, efficiency and effectiveness section of this report. In prior years, no significant weaknesses were identified and that there are no outstanding recommendations relating to prior years. The Council's underlying arrangements in relation to governance are not significantly different currently. So you know, this idea that it is there as a money-making, money-saving operation is simply not borne out by this whole suite of papers which have come before Cabinet, which are open and transparent and available to anyone to read, and which focus entirely on the improvement of care standards. You know, the main driver, therefore, is entirely on value for money and on sufficiency. North's coming out of care. They don't want to stay in care, and that is fundamental to our decision. The investor is a very well capitalized investor with enormous expertise. I think it's some 24,000 beds that they run in the US. Stowe is a very highly regarded company, and I have no doubt that our due diligence, which will continue, will be able to demonstrate that.
Thank you. Back to you, Councillor Price.
Thank you, Chair. It's a final question, and I appreciate the answer there. I mean, I've got 8 years' experience on audit, so I would refute some of the points you've made there in the respect that audit investigations and studies are only as good as how well they are set in the first place. And it will lead on to my question, because effectively, when you've got weaknesses in governance around an organisation, your audit committee should be picking that up. And clearly there are weaknesses here. And so that shows that your audit committee and your internal audit is not functioning well. So it's a wider problem there, but what I would say personally, not having sat on your audit committee here and had the opportunity to make the improvements it clearly needs. But what I would say in terms of accountability and future risk, since this sale is framed as a consequence of the Council's own failure to oversee the investment and governance of Northcare during the current contract, why should the public trust that offloading these homes to a private provider is a strategic success rather than an admission of management failure that leaves residents without long-term guarantees? So the fact that you've kind of got to this point, it's happened so immediately, okay, it's either been a slow burn problem, okay, which you've been monitoring and working with through your audit processes, or you've got a complete failure of oversight, and then it's this sudden realisation that the sale needs to happen. Now, I do understand that we've got 70 million growth in adult services, and I do understand that in previous decisions you've basically outed your responsibilities to a wholly owned company, so you don't have direct control. So I do understand the circumstances of how we are here today. But ultimately, you have one job to do, which is to oversee the company and make sure it functions and delivers on what you want to do. And you failed at that because the reality is the company is now having to sell it off. And you're losing those assets. You're losing us those assets forever. Okay,
Sorry,
they're owned by the
Councillor
county.
Price, this is a question.
Yeah, so
session.
the question is,
I
why the management failure? Why the management failure?
Okay, thank you. Could you address the question, please, Councillor Jameson?
Happy to, Chair. Yes, well, of course, I don't accept that there has been any sense of management failure whatsoever on behalf of this council and the way in which it has operated with Norsecare. I don't accept that there is a weakness in the audit, either the external or internal audit position. And I don't accept that I have just one job by that, but that's probably another issue. But the main point that there's been failure is a grotesque and I think a most unfortunate way of framing this whole picture. I would reiterate that Norsecare went into COVID. It responded to COVID extremely effectively. It was widely commented at the time in this chamber about how well that it did. COVID didn't stop when the pandemic stopped. The aftermath of that was significant. It caused issues in the company. You will recall that interest rates shot up after COVID and really rendered it impossible to borrow the funding to continue a transformation program where the problems were augmented by a war in Ukraine. None of these issues, even if I did have just one job, are things which I could do anything to resolve. These are external facts and they are existential issues for a company that does not have the ability. Yes, of course, we can borrow the public, but it is our responsibility to borrow effectively. It is absolutely clear, and indeed, the direction of travel in any other local authority. I noticed Cornwall was just the latest to go down the route that we're going down. The vast majority of local authorities have already gone down this particular route, and I can see exactly why. So it's actually not a question of failure. It's quite the reverse, that over a long period of time, the first paper came out in August 24, as I've said, over a long period of time, this cabinet, along with key members of the officer group, have worked together to create a multifaceted and multi-thinking process of what this council and this county more like needs over the future. And I think that it is a very clear and fundamentally sound policy that we are.
Still in the questions start part of the meeting. It's this stage I turn to Councillor Morphew, who is a member of the committee, to ask questions, I presume, of Councillor Jameson.
Yes, I'm tempted to ask questions of myself. I can be quite creative.
The estate.
Is it in the public domain?
Not to my knowledge.
Why not?
Because it was part of a process of working out what we're going to do in the future. You know, this is all we have this conversation the entire time, Councillor Morphew, but the working out of policy is not necessarily ever going to be held in the public domain. We're making various decisions on various different matters in time.
Thank you. And
calling in, but Mr. Wake is indicated to me.
It's in the sufficiency paper that came to Cabinet in January.
That's helpful, thank you. You talk about, I'm going back to Councillor Jameson, the impact of COVID on all of this. Now, a number of things really. First of all, it seemed to me that in 2019 everything was going fine. COVID didn't start until somewhat later. So at what point was the decisions made and where did the decline in Norsecare start? It was still 1%. You'd already had a report to Cabinet which talked about recovery after COVID, which didn't mention any shortfall or problems with the Norsecare contract. So how come this wasn't taken into account or referenced, and how come, even though we were at historically low rates, something wasn't done to address part or all of the estate? What we've just heard from the sufficiency statement was that it is possible to perhaps just do up part of the estate rather than all of the estate, but that option doesn't seem to have been considered. So how were these decisions made way back then, and how did this problem come about?
I think just in terms of, for brevity's sake, I think what Councillor Morphew is looking here is some indication actually of the timeline, because we've got a decision which is being made now, which obviously is informed by previous decisions. It would be helpful perhaps, rather than going into the ins and outs of what the interest rates were at different points, if you could just answer the point in terms of the timeline as far as where we got to where we are now.
I'd prefer for Ian Wake to provide the information separately rather than just give you rough figures, but we can certainly provide that timeline without any problem whatsoever. Okay, so that's not able to be provided at this meeting. That's the position. I'm going to come away from you, Councillor Morphew, now. Take a breath, because we've got Councillor Long and then Councillor Kemp.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Within the Adult Social Care Select Committee report that came in November, they were talking about the strategic priorities for adult social care, and strand number 5 of that is to transform commissioning to deliver better care outcomes.
Well, I most certainly believe it does, and it's fundamental to it. I don't know if Mr. Wake wants to add to that.
Thank you. Councillor Kemp.
But surely the costs of interest have been going up for everything, roads, for children's services, everything. So why is it that there wasn't incremental money put towards the refurbishment of the North Care estate?
Councillor Jameson wants to address from that. I'll allow you to do so.
Well, I'd really make the point that the figure that you used there, Councillor Kemp, 74 million, is interest and MRP, the risk call in.
Okay,
Chair, thank you. My point very quickly being, does that not make it affordable for this council in the context of its other borrowing to be supporting its wholly owned company to transform?
There's a whole issue of subsidy control which is changing at the moment, which has changed since 2010 when this thing was set up in the first place. I would just reiterate the general point, and I'm happy to get you the exact timeline. But you know, the point really is, the fundamental point is itself. We did not wish to continue in the care market. This was all clearly put into the June Cabinet report, that they wish to come out of the care market. The whole question of turning from profitability to loss was a function very much of the pandemic and the company's response to it. And you know, I just think that we've already answered this adequately. The point really, the fundamental point that this committee has to focus on is not these, I think, sort of fairly dancing on a pinhead past remarks, but what is the Cabinet proposing to do? What is the strategic direction of this administration in relation to the provision of elderly care in Norfolk? And I believe it's the right thing to do, and it has to do with precisely that. It has to do with the best possible elderly care for our residents over the next 25, 30 years.
Thank you. I'd remind members that we are here to discuss the call-in in front of us, and the parameters of what we're discussing is the call-in. We're not here to go into wider issues around the management and various assets in adult social care going back in history. We're here to talk about the call-in, and with the stage we're at is about questions to either the parties who have called in the decision and those who have responded around the substance of the call-in. And I would wish you to please direct any future questions down those narrow routes, please. Now, I've had an indication from Councillor Price I have Councillor Morphew, 54321. Any others? In which case we'll close after Councillor Morphew. Councillor Price and Councillor Morphew.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I suppose this question is potentially to Councillor Jameson. Officers might want to answer, the monitoring officer might want to answer. But, you know, it's occurring to me that we're away from a minded to decision. Okay, we've got a Labour government that has cancelled elections up and down the country because it's
So we're not here to discuss that, Councillor Price.
All right,
please,
okay. So, okay, in the context
your
of making this decision, okay, when the three union and Norwich becomes, I am sure that the council makeup in Norwich will not want to have sold these properties off. Do we feel that this decision is premature? And should we not be postponing this decision till after we understand the unitary makeup of this county? So there's a valid argument to say that through the LGA process that you should not be making massive financial decisions. It's clearly laid out. We're a few weeks from the minded to decision. Okay, how can you justify this? Surely an extension of the contract for 1 year so the unitary can make this decision, or unitaries, is the right way to go forward. So can officers and cabinet
going to just turn directly to the monitoring officer on this. Is there anything which would prevent this council from making a decision which would potentially tie the hands of a future council?
No.
Thank you. In which case, I consider that question to be addressed. Councillor Morphew.
What happened around that, the decision-making processes and what didn't happen, really should be informing where we go to make sure that we've got a proper grip on the next phases of this decision and the consequences of the decision.
Councillor Morphew, I'm waiting for the question.
I'm getting to the question. I was about to say to get to the question and say to Councillor Jameson, do you really not think that the liaison committee, which was a fundamental part of the contract with North Care, was important?
So I certainly do not think that you are correct in equalising the importance of scrutiny with that of an internal committee that was set up, and the arrangements changed.
The contract with North, and there's never been a change in that contract to take it out. Nothing which replaces it, succeeds it, carries forwards its terms of reference, and nothing which actually has reviewed any of the homes closures and brought them to Cabinet. There was a governance structure which was legally part of that contract.
Thank you, Councillor Morphew. I think the question is that you're posing, the points that you've raised, does that actually undermine the decision that's taken that those processes were perhaps not followed? Councillor James.
No, that wasn't it. What I'm saying is we should understand what happened to make sure that we learn the lessons and it doesn't get carried forward.
Okay, thank you.
So alternative arrangements were put in place as this particular process was.
Jones. You've Now, okay, I'm going to do it that way round. Councillor Jameson, I'll let you sum up first, and I'll give the final word to the callers in, because it will keep everybody happy.
Thank you for that incisive decision-making, Chair. I very much appreciate it. In terms of summing up, the fact is that I've very clearly articulated the purpose of this decision. I have very clearly articulated that it was not a decision made in relation to the residential care on its own, but as part of a much wider decision on how we should have care on behalf of for our elderly population in the future. And this includes the £35 million that we're spending in independent living. It includes the Housing with Care programme that we're putting out now. And also it includes a residential portfolio. Under that circumstance, is it correct that we should use what was a system used in the past of having separate companies, or indeed even in-house? No, because we, along with every other local authority, do not have the capital to do that. And what our aim should be is not some ideological statement, but it should be what is best. How are we best going to look after the elderly? And I think that these are the main points. And I'm sorry if Councillor Morphew thought I wasn't taking the scrutiny sensibly, but the fact is that these call-in points are, I think, not particularly significant. I think that they are largely political mischief-making, and it has nothing to do with best value. It has nothing to do with best value for the taxpayer. It has nothing to do with best value for the residents. It has nothing to do with the best opportunities for the staff. And these are the key questions. Is what difference, would any of this call-in make to these forward-looking, strategic decisions that we are working on together at the moment. So I am very comfortable that the governance and oversight has been followed properly. It was led by Norfolk County Council's cabinet, but it's been supported by cross-departmental officer input. It's from property, from finance, from procurement, legal. Adult social services, of course, have been central to it. There have been 3 major papers in August 2024, November 2024 and June 2025, and those papers form a suite of decision-making which leads anybody who reads them to the conclusion that this has been transparent and entirely operated. And I think that is what we should be focused on. So I've explained at length what the strategy is, and this multifaceted problem has been grasped, and I think that we've put together an articulate and well-documented strategy to bring us in to the mid part of the 21st century. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jameson. Over to you, Councillor Jones and Councillor Morphew.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the committee for the questioning around this. I'm disappointed in Councillor Jameson because introducing the kind of party political knockabout stuff at this point just actually doesn't really fit here. There will be opportunities for that, and I will promise that I will give them to him so that we will be back in a different forum to make sure that we can discuss this and political choices. But this isn't about political choices. This is about the ignoring the governance issues which arose as a result of the liaison committee. It was really important. We haven't learnt the lessons from it because we haven't had the answers to it. If you look and see what the monitoring officer said in their exchanges with her over the last couple of days, it's as far as she can go. So what is there to be learnt from it? And I think we need more information about that, and the Cabinet should have more information about that. And so much for a transparent process. Today we find out that North, not the County Council, have come up with information which says that restoring the care estate or upgrading the care estate would be £80 million. Now, I mean, I look forward, and we will be after that information so that we can see a breakdown of what that means to see whether or not there are actually different options available for the North estate. Because, we haven't seen this as councillors. We haven't had an opportunity to scrutinise this. The sufficiency, and I'm delighted that we've been referred to that, even though it's not part of this calling, suggests that there are other options in there, and we could identify specific parts of the estate to upgrade to deal with sufficiency issues. Well, that gives other options which we haven't had a look at in terms of the sell-off. So there are things which weren't part of this specific decision which are worthy to go back and look at and give members a chance to look at. And when it comes to the local member protocol, come on, I mean, if we set a precedent today of saying that members can be excluded from decisions like this, and yes, they did get a copy of the press release, but that's not part of the local member protocol. There is actually another protocol. It's called the media protocol, and that's part of the Constitution, and that requires that members get sent press releases that are associated with things that happen in their divisions before they go to the media. That was fulfilled. A bit late, but nevertheless it was fulfilled. But that's a different protocol, and it doesn't mean that we were involved or members were involved in that. And what does involved mean? Being sent a bit of paper to tell you what's going on? That's not what I got elected as councillor for, and I don't think anybody in this room did either. It is important that we learn from history, and it is important that we are inclusive in this as well, because I think it's also important to remember that this is not just about homes for elderly people. There's also people with physical disabilities involved in this, and I think we need to make sure that we are talking about real people, not just talking about property and contracts, because these are real people in their real homes. And whilst it might be that the language in this is really a truth. I'll come back to this in a different forum, but I worry about the way that we are actually dealing with this as an organisation. I never said, and I can't ever remember saying that this council is borrowing too much. What I have often said is that we're borrowing for the wrong things. And I will again come back to that, but I wanted to clarify that. What we are not clear about, either from the decision or from the conversation, the discussion today, is what this decision is actually trying to achieve. We don't know whether or not it's going to be sold off for investment, or whether the investment of the private sector includes breaking it up, repurposing, investing in it. We don't know. We don't know whether or not all of it is going to be sold. We don't know some of the financial figures, because whilst there was 4 reports, I can't remember how much of it is below the line, but a lot of the useful information, important information, is not in the public domain. And I can attest, although I can't tell you what it is, but there is some good stuff in there that really ought to be informing what members' discussion is. And I tell you, it would be a different discussion this morning if all of that information had been in the public domain, or at least available to members. Now, I want this to go back, we want this to go back to Cabinet to have another look. There are concerns that the attitude that the Cabinet member has taken suggests that he's already made up his mind that he's got to be right around all of this lot. But I think we should say as a committee, because I think there is concern out there that says this may not be right enough. And even if the decision is maintained, there is a number of things around here that need to be put to right so that everybody can be reassured. And I think referring it back would do that.
Thank you, Councillor Morphew. Committee, we're now at the stage where we are asking what proposals we wish to make as a committee. In terms of what we have in front of us, the options are to refer the issue back to Cabinet with a set of reasons, to note the call-in but take no further action. Within the Constitution, there is also the provision to refer the matter to full council, but really that's only if it's contrary to the NCC policy framework or contrary to or not in accordance with the budget. And there's nothing in the call-in which has suggested that that's the case, so that's probably not an option which is in front of us today. So we've got the 2 options in front of us. In terms of proposals, who would like to go first? I think Councillor Proctor wants to go first.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. That's been quite an interesting session of questions, answers and comments, really, on this particular decision from Cabinet back in on the 26th of January. And if you look at the context of it, it emanates from the contract ending with Norse Care on the 31st of March, and that's been known about for some time. So the proposal I'd like to make, Chairman, is that the committee notes the call-in but takes no further action. And let me give the reasons for that. First of all, there is the end in the contract, which has been known about for some time, so action did need to be taken. That was the first thing. The second thing is there has been a considerable amount of paperwork, proposal and detail going through the Cabinet system over the last year or so. Councillor Jameson referred to them. So there is a trail there of what's actually happening, how this came to light as to what's going to happen next with the cessation of the contract. And I think the third thing really is the issue of the decision being made on the 26th of January in principle. There's still a long way to go on this in terms of negotiating the final contract, the details of it, and issues like this are not easy. Everybody recognises that. They recognise, I'm sure, the risks involved in dealing with something like this. So at the end of the day, the question I put to myself, and I'm sure others did as well,
in what's been said, what's been dealt with, is the decision made on the 26th of January by Cabinet a safe decision in all the circumstances? I would suggest, Chairman, it is a safe decision, and that's why I made the proposal of noting the call-in and taking no further action. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Long, you've indicated you seconding?
Yes, I would like to second, Chair, and I'll speak now if I can on seconding that proposal. I think we've heard evidence that this decision supports Adult Social Services Directorate transformation plan. I think every single member of the council was effectively given a heads up on what was happening, and actually, you know, to say, well, I've got a care home in my division, therefore I should have some form of different advice. Actually, the residents of those care homes are from every part of Norfolk, including the ones that don't have a care home in them. And, you know, I feel specific relevance to that because I used to have a care home in my division and now I haven't. It's a bit like a decision on libraries. Not every division has got a library, you know, and so on. And actually, people in my division haven't got a library, but they do use the library. So, you know, how far do you extend it? So I think the evidence hasn't been given that demonstrates that needed to be something different to what happened. And I do think in terms of the sort of meat of the decision, that it does accord with that transformation programme.
Thank you. So we've had a proposal and that's been seconded. That's open to debate. Councillor Kemp.
Chair, I would like to propose an alternative proposal.
I'm sorry, at this stage you can speak against the proposal which has been made. We're running a debate on that. We'll conclude that debate. If you are looking at an alternative, I would suggest you're probably now speaking against the proposal which is in front
Okay,
of us.
I'm speaking against the proposal. I think it would be necessary to refer this back to the decision maker because it is a momentous decision for all of Norfolk. And it's taking our core business, adult social care, which we do. Nobody else does adult social care. It's a county responsibility in local government. And we're alienating it. We're giving it away, and we just shouldn't be doing that. So I'll be speaking against this proposal and ask us to have a proposal to refer it back. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Price, did you indicate?
Yeah, no, thank you, Chair. Good to see the Conservative Vice Chair and Conservative members supporting the Conservatives' decision to move this along. Scrutiny is alive and well. Yes, I am going to speak against this. What has been made abundantly clear today.
Sorry, Councillor Long. No, I haven't called you. Councillor Price, please continue.
Yeah, and that's just facts. That's just facts, guys. Don't get emotional. What we've seen today is we've seen that there are a myriad of options potentially on the table of how the overall care could be run. It could be split up. Some of the assets could be retained. We've also seen that this process has happened behind closed doors in a cabinet form. Okay, 3 papers have been referred to that are all going to cabinet, which is a closed way of decision making, and this does have a wide impact. This has a public interest. This particular momentous sale. So it is good governance, and it is good on the part of the Cabinet to show that it is not a closed circle of small decision makers, and that there is a wider consultation and a support from the wider council in such decision making. So it would be wise for this to be more open and more transparent. So there are other options on the table. We've had a figure today produced by the organisation, the private company that want to offload the liability they have, which hasn't been checked. You know, I'm astounded to hear that we're just accepting on face value as the contract holder, oh, it's worth 80 million, yeah, all right then. So no due diligence done at that stage. So again, this needs to go back. What the Cabinet need to do to show the public that their decisions are valid is to allow it to come, to reconsider the decision and allow it to come to this committee for its proper scrutiny and go through the process in a much more public, transparent way. So yes, I do not support the just to note it and move on.
Thank you. I haven't had any other members of the committee indicate. So on that basis, we'll take the proposal which has been put forward by Councillor Proctor to the vote, that the committee notes the call-in but takes no further action. All of those in favour, please. We got that?
Got that, thank you.
Okay, thank you. All of those against? That proposal is passed. Thank you. That concludes that item. And thank you all very much for your contributions on that item. What I'm going to suggest that we do is we still press on. If we go, please, to the Chief Fire Officer and the next item of the Norfolk Fire and Rescue Service Community Risk Management Plan. I think we might have a little bit more agreement and unanimity on this item. Over to you, please, Cabinet Member Councillor Dewsbury.
Thank you. If it's all right with you, I'll do a brief introduction and then the Chief Fire Officer will give you background information regarding recommendations 1 and 2, if that's all right. Okay, so the fire services have been required to produce a community risk management plan since 2018. This plan ensures that the fire services approach to prevention, protection and response continues to meet the evolving needs of Norfolk's communities. The challenges the service prepares for are changing. Climate-related incidents, demographic shifts, new technologies and lessons learned from national inquiries all highlight the need for a proactive, forward-thinking approach that will not only be responsive but also practical and deliverable to ensure that the fire service remains resilient, effective and focused on keeping Norfolk safe. The draft plan went to Cabinet on October the 13th. It then went out for public consultation from October the 15th until November 26th. The service has consulted its workforce, residents, businesses, emergency service partners, local authorities and community organisations to ensure the priorities set reflect the risks faced by Norfolk people. The plan is with this committee today for you to review and scrutinise the final plan. This will then go to Cabinet on March the 2nd and then to full council on March the 24th. So that's the overall view. The Chief Fire Officer will give you background information to the other 2 recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Dewsbury. Elected members will remember that we talked in the autumn session around how much pre-engagement we had done this time in developing the proposals and putting together the community risk management plan. And I think that's been borne out in this consultation process with 84% of respondents saying that they agreed or strongly agreed with all 8 proposals, which is good because it means that we got the direction of travel right in the first place and accurately assessed the risks to our county and the things that people were concerned about. Therefore, we haven't made any significant changes to the CRMP or the proposals within it, but I would draw your attention to our emergency response standards. So this relates to proposal 4 around enhancing our response. And if you care to look at page 489 of the pack, you'll see a section there on response standards where previously our response standards to emergencies where life may be at risk differentiated between fire risk incidents where we aimed to attend within 10 minutes and other life emergencies such as road traffic collisions or water rescues where we aimed to attend in 13 minutes. What we are doing as a result of the consultation and our own review is moving all life risk incidents to a 10-minute response time, which we think reflects the importance of anywhere where life may be at risk across the county. And our initial modelling indicates that we are able to meet this 80% of the time. So we're confident that we can meet this public safety commitment. And therefore the recommendations not only ask the committee to look at the public consultation and the associated amendments, but also to endorse that change to our emergency response standard and the associated vital signs reporting. But I'm happy to answer any questions on anything within here. I know we did discuss it at length last time, but if there's anything anybody would like to pick up, then thank you.
Thank you. It's always good when a public consultation shows that we're pointing in the right direction. and there aren't too many changes that are required. Do any members have any questions, please? Yeah, Councillor Proctor.
It's not so much a question, Chairman, it's more a comment reading through the report and also what Chief Fire Officer just said this morning about the upgrade in the response time. But I suppose the good thing about this is really the amount of response, well, the numbers of responses, but the percentage of the responses that agreed with what's being proposed. So I think from a strategic point of view, which this document is, it's something that the fire service can now rely on to say this is our way forward. We have consulted widely on it. We have had broad response saying very positive responses back to it. So I think personally, Chairman, this is a good document that we can say this is the way that fire services are going to manage what it does in the future, and particularly its service to people in Norfolk.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Price and Councillor Long.
Thank you, Chair. I have 3 questions to the officer. So I'll start with question 1, and it's about the response times. What specific operational changes or resource reallocations are being made to ensure that this 80% target is achievable, particularly in the most remote rural areas?
So obviously, I think I've explained previously in committee that we dynamically move our resource about the county to maximise cover at any one point in time. So before a call comes in, we don't know what that call is going to be. So we are already looking at how quickly we can get to any emergencies, and we plan for a number of simultaneous emergencies happening at any one point in time. So we don't at this point have to make any changes. Our modelling shows that we should be able to achieve this, but because we haven't proactively monitored it previously, we don't know if there are any anomalies, but that's the point of bringing it in now, looking at if we've got any shortfalls and whether we need to do anything else with our dynamic response modelling. We have in the last week implemented a new control and mobilising system, which is much more accurate in terms of nearest appliance mobilisation, and that's proving to give us much more accurate data. So I'm very confident that with those 2 things in combination that we should be in a good place. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate the answer there. Just about climate readiness, Proposal 5 focuses on the readiness for summer heat waves, including increasing the stock of tactical response vehicles. Will the increased use of smaller TRVs provide sufficient capacity for major wildfires compared to the traditional fire appliances?
Yes, you remember the previous CRMP, we made some changes at this stage actually in the process to our wildfire preparedness, and we're fortunate to receive an extra £1 million in funding from the council to add in additional kit and equipment, and that did include 4 kind of smaller units that are able to be more agile. They've been invaluable this summer. Obviously we saw a significant increase in fires in the open. We were pleased with how we were able to respond to those, and very grateful to the public for their proactive reporting of those so we could get out to those incidents quickly. We do believe that having a wider fleet of those smaller vehicles is important for us, and we are actively pursuing that. Obviously, we then need to make sure that we can house them, make sure that they're in the right place in our fire stations as well. So exactly where they will go, we wouldn't be able to kind of communicate at this point in time, but we definitely think that those smaller agile appliances are very helpful, and also they allow our bigger appliances to move on when we're just damping down or just keeping an eye on things and making sure there's no reignition of smaller fires. So they're very helpful.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I appreciate that. I suppose a little nuance would be to understand how they act differently to a traditional, appliance and capacity in terms of, I'm looking really for assurance that the smaller units can actually put out any kind of size of wildfire, or is it more a multi-appliance kind of response?
Yeah, it's a multi-appliance response, and as I said, they're quite often used in the later stages or the early stages where we've got fires in the open, so they tend to have a smaller crew associated with them, so potentially 2 people at a time, and they can stay longer without tying up a wider crew who may need to go to a more severe fire. would not be able to tell you the water capacity of each of the tanks, but I can get that back to you, but they do not hold as much water. And one of the difficulties, of course, is making sure that the load on those kind of 4x4s is appropriate for the vehicle. So we have kind of different mechanisms for applying water from those as well, but I can get you that technical detail.
Yeah, no, I'd find it interesting just because I'm a bit of a nerd. I suppose it's kind of like being that kind of first responder. It's about getting the initial control and then, as you say, finishing off and stuff. So thank you for that information. So just the final point is around the high-risk inspections that you note there. And it says the plan prioritises inspections for non-domestic dwellings with sleeping accommodation. How will the service ensure that this focus does not lead to a backlog or reduced oversight of other high-risk commercial and industrial premises? So how are you balancing that risk with that focus?
So we've done a considerable amount of work on this over the last year, looking at our risk-based inspection and audit programme. So we do have a kind of range of buildings that we look at proactively. Also, we would get referrals in from the public or from business owners in different circumstances. We've increased the size of the team. We have got some short-term funding from central government for the protection team. We would like to see that made multi-year and have more certainty, because the skill set involved in the protection activity and enforcement activity is quite specialist. So we have got, as I said, an increase for now, but I would like to see that shored up over the future periods, because there is a lot of work to do, particularly around not just the inspection programme and the enforcement programme, but remediation of buildings across the county as well. So that team are incredibly busy at the moment. They are also the same team that will get involved in looking at planning applications, which I know we've discussed in this committee before, so that they are quite tied up at the moment.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Long.
Yes, thank you. I've been around a few years and seen a few of these now, and you know, it's good to hear, especially about the improved, looking for the improved response times to flooding incidents. One of the phenomenon that is a regular, and I suppose it's classed as a road traffic incident, is where vehicles leave the highway and end up in ditches, drains and rivers. And I presume that response time, talking of flooding, would also be matched for that, because that would be classed as a life-threatening emergency in terms of water, a water incident. I just want clarification of that. Particularly pertinent in the Fens where I represent, and I know several people, myself included, who've ended up in a watercourse. My son, one of my best friends. You know, it's so many people over the driving career finds them. I wasn't driving, by the way. I'll just point that out. Former councillor Nick Daubney was. But it is pertinent. And we do need the response times in those rural areas, because if someone's in one of those drains, the inundation into the vehicle with the water is very rapid, and probably more rapid than sometimes flooding incidents that build up over a number of hours. Thank you.
Yeah, so just a clarification around flooding incidents, because obviously that has a very wide range of connotations. We need to be really clear that, because we do experience a lot of floods in Norfolk, unless life is at risk, we will not always go to people's homes. So unless they are in danger, they are unable to evacuate themselves, or they have some kind of other need, then quite often those individuals need to support themselves and work with other agencies. What you're talking about in terms of the road traffic collisions and those involving water, absolutely, where somebody is mechanically trapped or is unable to kind of get out of those vehicles themselves, then of course we would consider that a life risk, and that absolutely would fall under that definition. And as you'll be aware, if you've been involved in a situation like that, they can escalate quite rapidly, as can cars entering fords, which may have looked seemingly innocuous, but can rise rapidly, and people become trapped, or the cars be carried away. So there are nuances around the term flooding, but absolutely, where we believe somebody's life is at risk, then our control room operators are very skilled at making that decision quite quickly, and will always err on the side of caution. Thank you.
That's very reassuring. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Kemp.
Yes, I note the tremendous achievement of increasing the home safety fire visits, the safety checks, by 585%. That's a huge achievement. You're targeting this on people with corrected characteristics. How would somebody access one of those home fire safety visits? Ask for it if they don't have access to the internet, please.
Yeah, I think we again did pick this up, and there is a link, as you've rightly pointed out, on the internet that people can access. There is a phone number there as well, but as with anything related to the County Council, if people are struggling, they can always phone the main County Council number, and our libraries are also fantastic at signposting people if they're struggling to find the right information. We do have
Welcome back, councillors, to the Strategic and Corporate Select Committee meeting, which moves us on to the next item, which is Norfolk County Council Budget 26 to 27, along with the two appendixes, A, the Revenue Budget, Medium-Term Financial Strategy, Appendix B, the Capital Strategy and Programme. We have a report from the Director of Strategic Finance in front of us. We have with a Cabinet member here, Councillor Jameson, and I will ask who would like to make an introduction.
No, I'll talk about that. You want to do that? Yeah. I'll leave you to that. Other than having else to talk about. Okay, so I'll start off, and I'll be as brief as always, and just perhaps introduce this next budget. But you know, I present this today following the release last week of the, or in fact earlier this week, of the final local government settlement. You know, although there is much to dislike about a settlement that discriminates so obviously against rural authorities like us, we do at least have the high-level commitment to resolve Council's SEND deficits, which I will address a bit later on. But overall, for 26-27, this budget delivers 42.3 million of savings and efficiencies, but no cuts. It invests 76.3 million into frontline services and the local economy without being forced back onto the ropes of our statutory responsibilities, and it proposes a 4.998% council tax increase, which is, of course, now in line with government assumptions. And crucially, it achieves a balanced and sustainable position. Now, this has required difficult decisions and new ways of working across every part of the organisation, but it is a budget that is deliverable, it's responsible, it's honest. Now, colleagues will be well aware that local government has faced nearly 2 decades of constrained funding alongside rapidly rising demand. And unlike central government or the NHS, we have to balance our books every year. And between 2011 and today, this council has delivered £652 million worth of savings through transformation, efficiencies and service redesign, and I'm very proud of that. The scale of savings is unprecedented, but it obviously becomes harder every year. Our most significant pressures remain. And critically, whilst the SEND issue is potentially removed in the longer term, next year, interest costs to the Council of funding the deficit in 26-27 before the government resolves the historic issue could reach some £10 million. Adult social care demand and children's services placement costs are obviously a key issue. And third, now we of course have the costs of preparing to fund local government reorganisation. Now on SEND, I want to be absolutely clear on SEND. I've long called for an equitable solution to a problem that was never of our making. And therefore I welcome the news that the government has announced that 90% of the historic overspend in the high needs block will be resolved by the autumn. This will mean, of course, that we will have to find the remaining 10% ourselves, although there may be mitigating factors to work through on this. But Norfolk's SEND deficit is forecast to reach around 180 million by March 2026, and that figure will continue to grow significantly before responsibility transfers to the government in 2028. So we can expect, therefore, to continue to pay millions of pounds in interest and lost income as a consequence of the SEND deficit in the course of this financial year. We hear that the government will resolve the issue in the autumn, but the autumn has proved to be coming very late in terms of the government decision-making processes up until now. Now, for Norfolk, elsewhere in the final settlement, very little additional government funding has been provided beyond council tax. Over 90% of future funding growth for rural and Shire counties is assumed now to come from council tax. In Norfolk, this figure this year is 83%, but I would point you to the graphs on pages 44 and 46 of your notes. I think those are really significant and easy picture to show the extent to which Shire counties like ours are being hit relative to other local authority areas, and the extent to which we will be utterly dependent upon the revenue abilities of collecting council tax in the foreseeable future. It's not fair, it's not sustainable. The removal of remoteness from most funding formulae, the continuation of the recovery grant that does not benefit Norfolk at all, and indeed the ongoing redistribution of funding towards urban areas all work against counties like ours, where services cost more to deliver. And to add insult to injury, the government has announced another 440 million of this supposedly one-off fund to target even more resources on a select cohort of urban and metropolitan councils, rather than providing extra funding to all county and unitary councils. This is wholly unfair, and it compounds the decision to downgrade rurality and remoteness within the formulae. The government's funding system now bakes in annual council tax increases simply to stand still. And furthermore, I would add that in order to support Norfolk's district councils, hard hit as well by the local authority settlement, we've agreed that they apply a second home council tax and receive an additional 25% of this additional income. Without it, frankly, they would be unlikely to deal with the increased pressures that they have in housing, homelessness and elsewhere. Local government reorganisation cannot come soon enough. We face major structural change result through both devolution and LGR. But with the latter, I have to say that I hope the government will remove politics from reorganisation and judge proposals solely on what delivers the best outcome for residents and for taxpayers. And the evidence is clear that a single unitary councils at county level reduces duplication, minimises disruption and delivers better value for money, and anything else will risk loading additional costs and efficiencies onto an already overstretched system. I'd refer you to Table 4, which is the net revenue budget, because that will show what it is that we are spending. Remember, we're spending additional money, we're delivering additional funding into the key areas, particularly, obviously, adults and children's social care, where investment of 37 million and 31 million, respectively, will continue to see a well-managed, I can't stress that enough, those two departments, well-managed departments and their prevention and transformation strategies, which have been demonstrated in other committees to the council so far today, and they've done so much to put a brake on the exponential rising demand, which is a function of democratic and societal changes here. Its budget will support economic growth, skills and infrastructure investment. It maintains, and this coming into LGR is so important, it maintains financial stability. It ensures that a continuing authority will be able to deliver a robust medium-term strategy, assuming, of course, that financial failure is not hardwired into a future council through ill-conceived structures. And finally, it keeps a tight financial control with continued focus on value for money, relentless focus on efficiency, while putting transformation of the way that we deliver our services at the heart of our cost control policies, rather than the sort of short-term salami slicing of services. I think I will leave that there. Specifically, I might just count. Do you think that I've covered sufficiently the SEND issue and the points mentioned in the final settlement, or would you like to add to that, Harvey?
If I could just expand on this a little bit. Clearly, the announcement by the government regarding the SEND is helpful because it provides some clarity in respect of the period up until March 26. What the government has said is that it will give further support without stating what that support will look like for 26/7 and 27/8. So there is still some uncertainty and therefore risk for the council to manage in the short term until the government changes the rules and procedures from April 28. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed for those introductions. I've had 3 members indicate so far. We're not going to go into any debate about LGR today. I'll say that. We will all agree to disagree on our respective positions on that. We're here to discuss the budget. First, I've got Councillor Price, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so bit of a dry run for next week. I'm sure Councillor Jameson will be doing a lot of recycling of that speech for next week. But sorry, I'm only pulling your leg. But you know, this is obviously. Go on.
You should be happy about recycling.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm proud of you. I'm proud of you. It's good. It's good. No, in all sincerity, obviously, this is a bit before the Lord Mayor's show, as it were, because you know we'll be doing all of this next week. But I guess I just want to pick up on that first point about the SEND, and obviously there is an insecurity in the future, and I think it should be welcomed actually that the government is going to basically fund, underwrite the majority of these costs. And you know, I would throw out there what were the previous government doing, letting this kind of deficit grow. I'm no supporter of the Labour government, but I would say it does seem that it gives us some assurance, and I think it's a good step for the government to take on that debt. And when they have to fully take it on, it will be a major headache for them. But looking at, I've spent a good few days going through the budget, and it's alarming to see the increase we're going to see of 70-odd million in adult services, 30-odd in children, and projected similar growths over the MTFS as well. So it is an acute area of risk to the council. It is an acute area that we have to manage responsibly, and I don't envy the cabinet member's choices that he has to make in setting a budget. I guess what I would like to bring up with him, just sort of in a direct way, and we can do the rest, we can do it all on Tuesday or whatever, but with the projected budget gap of 36 million for 27-28 and over 103 across the life of the MTFS, what specific transformation programs beyond the current year are being developed to ensure long-term stability without further depleting reserves? And we've seen a few little reserves used here and there, willy-nilly, to try and make back the projected savings in the last financial year, where and we're cutting right to the bone now. So it's notwithstanding the future, the MTFS, we just keep punting down the road this massive debt, and I don't know if Councillor Jameson has got much more he can cut. So how are we going to make this deficit in the following year, Councillor, of 36?
Okay, well, thanks, Councillor. There's a few things there. So first of all, the sort of what about 26, 27, 28, and the size of the deficit at the end of the MTFS? I completely accept that, but I do look to department's ability to create the sort of long-term transformations that have come to the committees. I'm sure Mr. Wakewell can run through those in relation to his department. That is, to use the word, the trick is totally the wrong one. You understand what we're trying to do there, and I'm sure that Mr. Wake could give specific examples in relation to. It's okay. In terms of use of reserves, yes, there have been. We are using reserves, but I do get questions from members about, are we storing up cash in some pot? No, we're not. We're using reserves wherever we can in order that the budget can can be settled. You know, are we just punting down the road a massive debt? Well, I think if that was a question about the size of the revenue gap, I think I've answered that in the sense of what it is that we're going to do. In terms of the debt of this council, of course, we do repay through the MRP. We do repay that as a proportion, and that will gradually be paid. But you know, the debt that we have or carry as a council, you know, one just has to ask, well, what is it that a council actually does? It builds schools, it builds roads. So, of course, one has to pay for those, and that is the debt. But as long as the 5-1 officer can write in his report that that debt is, and the repayment thereof is robust, then I'm comfortable with that. Do you want to add anything to that?
I think you've basically covered it, but it is part of my role to ensure that the county council can afford the level of outstanding debt and borrowing it has. You know, from the budget that's been was presented to Cabinet, does include full allowance for the borrowing that the council currently has and is planning to undertake. I think the key issue for me is the future borrowing that the council may wish to undertake. Again, you know, I appreciate the council may not exist in a couple of years' time with LGR, but it is important that the council doesn't increase the level of debt to the extent that it then impacts on the funding of other services. And ultimately it is a trade-off of how the council uses the resources available to it between investment in capital and delivering revenue services, and clearly there's an element of political judgment in that. But in terms of this budget, I'm content that the level of debt that the county council has and will have by 31st of March 27 is affordable and fully allowed for within the budget. Thank you.
Yes, I'll come back. I've got just two small questions. Just to respond to that, yes, I understand we can make our MRP, our payments, and I understand the level of debt that a council can take on with assets that it has. And so I understand that. And I also accept the finance officer's point about setting a balanced budget now. The point really was more about this growth in the cost of delivery of services and how we're seeing that year on year laid out in the MTFS. And I would actually argue that some of the figures, you know, in terms of savings and of estimated growths, particularly with inflation and certain growths in SEND, etc., and aged population, perhaps are a little conservative. And that 100 million gap is going to be even bigger potentially by the time we get to the end of the decade. So, you know, so I acknowledge this budget is a balanced budget, and I do acknowledge that. I'm just highlighting the overall concerns of the direction of travel against the cost of delivering services in the future. And that really, and I would go further and say that, you know, I think Councillor Jameson has worked ruthlessly to transform the council to be a modern council, to use his word transform, and to make those savings. But there becomes a final point of where you can't find any more transformation. And I suspect that you're very close to that now. And you may have a comment on that. And I don't know how much more you can do. So the actual savings in the future could be much harder to realise. And I think we've seen that in this last financial year because we haven't effectively made those targets, and you know, and that's consistent. So maybe there is a comment on that. But basically, I do want the cabinet member to refer a bit more about this unfair distribution in terms of the Fair Funding 2.0 and how you know, and how it's favouring urban areas because we are a rural shire, and I do think we are being grossly impacted by that. So I wonder if he has any more to share on that. And, you know, the fact that, you know, it's baked in now, this 5% increase, the increase in the adult social care precept, you know, I can barely afford my council tax myself, right? It's you know, it's getting you know, to a point where, you know, I am, you know, it is a bill that worries me to see come and hit my doormat, you know, and in the narrative of the finance officer, you know, it's quite clear that, you know, it's referenced again that, you know, there is only so far you can push local taxation, right? And that point has been made. So again, we've got this baked in 5%. You know, the reality is that is also unsustainable. So sort of general comments about the ever-growing deficit in delivering services, the impact on us as a rural shire, and the fact that we can't keep putting 5% on people because we can't afford it, you know.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Councillor Price, for a comprehensive question. I would say, first of all, just on you know, being able to, are we just running out of to kind of the end of the barrel? I don't know what we don't know, and I would have said that AI will be an enormous transformer of costs and efficiencies for local authorities in the future, and therefore, you know, I think, you know, we have a good track record here of identifying savings in order to balance the budget, and you know, the gap that you have correctly identified, and I'll just go on to the second part of your question now, because the gap is largely driven by a very poor settlement in future years, and that is really what is going to be very difficult for us. And so, you know, in overall terms, really, there was, you know, the first point is recovery grant was supposed last year to be a one-off. And that was there just to sort of shore things up. But don't worry, we're going to wait for Fair Funding 2.0 and everything's going to be sorted out. But then the formula that popped up in June when 2.0 came up wasn't as the government would have wished. So they changed it, and the recovery grant was brought in again, and funding went to metropolitan areas, and it left poor old rural areas, remoteness gone. You know, so it's just gone, and we've got no recovery grant allocation, in spite of the fact that the government has put another £440 million into supposedly targeted at upper tier authorities, but it's not. That doesn't. I think it's upper tier authorities north of the Wash, you know, that is one of the big. Because there's been a technical correction. There was the treatment of business rates pooling was done incorrectly, and we have, as a result, had an increase in the final settlement over the initial settlement. The districts, of course, lose a lot of money in that, but they seem to be getting some money. It's all rather unclear to us at the minute. But the major announcements between provisional and now is, as you rightly say, and I acknowledge along with you, that the government have moved to resolve the issue. The trouble is, it is, and it's again perfectly reasonable, I suppose, that, you know, the devil will be in the details. I only have the high level, but you know, we do know that 10% will have to be found. Well, of course, under the old regime, when everything was just being kicked, the can was being kicked down the road, one wasn't having to find anything because it was all being put off balance sheet. Now we're going to suddenly have to find that 10% out of the revenue account. So that will be significant, but you know, quite what the level of that will be remains to be seen. So I think those are the main issues, and I think, you know, the fact is, it will be tough for rural communities, and it will be tough where you find the money. Now, can we go on putting on fire? You know, I think it's not for today, but you know, I increasingly would share your frustration with council tax mechanism for funding local authorities, and I think, you know, we need to address that, but it's a fundamental and obviously a central government issue.
Thank you. Moving on, Councillor Morphew.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I'll make a few general remarks as well, but I have two specific and I think significant issues that I want to raise. I think we should be delighted that the government are actually tackling some of the critical problems here. I mean, we've got 3-year settlements. We've actually got a government that's been brave enough to get a handle on the SEND funding and take responsibility for doing something about it after lots of years of neglect and faffing around, and hopefully the policy that comes with it, the white paper, won't be too far behind. But I think you've missed out some of the crucial bits, as I understand it, and yes, absolutely, there is a lot more detail yet. But as I understand it, the payment of the 90% comes with an expectation that there will be a plan. It's not no strings attached. And that's absolutely important, because that plan is going to need to run into 2028, when this council, and I think we need to remember in a more general context, that whether it's 1, 2 or 3, this council and councils in Norfolk will be under new ownership. You know, there'll be different councils, so we can plan and think as much as we like. But between now and November, with the new authorities, with the transitional arrangements coming in, then what we're looking at is a plan which is going to take us into the future of SEND, not just a short-term part of the fix or a continuation of what we've got now, which is also crucial because, as I understand it, the safety valve mechanism has gone too, and that's been done away with. Hooray! Because when it first came to what was our predecessor, the Scrutiny Committee, I think we said at the time that it wasn't going to work, and I think it's probably fair to say it didn't work. Some good stuff and good efforts were made out of it, but it was never likely to actually deliver what was expected of it. But I also understand, and perhaps Harvey can correct me, that of the 10% that we are going to be required to find, the money that we've put into the safety valve process already will be offset against that amount. Right, thank you. So that's about £5.5 million a year. So that means that 16.5, perhaps you just give
a second, Councillor Morphew.
Yeah, to stop your flow, but yes, just to confirm, the County Council would have made a contribution of £5.5 million for 3 years by the end of March 26, and that's £17.5 million, which the government has said as part of the guidance that it's published that will count towards the 10% contribution.
Excellent. Which is even better news. And yes, I know it leaves a gap, and I know we've got the 2 years, but the government have acknowledged the 2 years and that there will need to be support. And once the money does start coming through, I mean, Councillor Jameson wants it both ways. It doesn't count because it's kind of off the books money, but at the same time, we're having to pay interest for money that we would otherwise borrowing. So there will be a return because we will be able to use that money in other ways, which will be beneficial to us. Yes, I know it's still messy at the moment, but at least we've got a sense, and the structural change order will give some direction and guidance and probably rules around what we can do. So, I mean, I kind of get where we're at with the budget for this year. It's a bit like treading water because we don't know. So I don't think we should pretend other than what we don't know. It is this period of transition. It's uncomfortable. It's annoying of life. So I think we just need to have a bit of a check on that. The fact that we've got a multi-year settlement, and personally I don't have a problem with the fair funding review, which directs money more towards deprived areas. I think the rural areas, the adult social care grant does actually recognise the rural concerns, and I think everybody is looking to see how we can do stuff with rural areas, and I think the new unitaries should be able to come up with a better process. I note that Breckland have decided not to...
Councillor Murphy, can I encourage you towards a question?
Well, you can. Yes, I'm not sure I'm ready to get there yet, but give me another 30 seconds. But I know Breckland have decided not to introduce a two homes, second homes charge on there, which kind of goes to show that maybe some districts in the county aren't quite that deprived. Anyway, if I can turn to the two areas now that I did want to particularly raise. Some time ago, back in September, the government were asked by this council for a capital direction under the exceptional financial support, because the 35 million or so which the government had said they didn't weren't intended to claim back as a result of the failure of the Norwich Western Link project would actually, because there is no asset, would become a hit on the revenue budget. Now, we asked for permission for it to become a capital charge again, so it went onto the capital account. Now, as I understand it, at this point, we're still waiting for a response from the government. Can you please confirm that, and can you tell me where in the budget there are contingency plans for the £35 million, which potentially, if they agree in whole or part, could land on our revenue budget in a matter of a couple of weeks? And I have a second part, which I'll come back to.
I'm going to jump on the back of Councillor Murphy's question. There is a sense of deja vu in which we were discussing the same point this time last year, and we're believing that something was imminent. Time has obviously passed.
Harvey, can you just respond to that? I mean, it's there in your report, I know, but perhaps you'd make a specific response.
Yep, happy to respond to that, thank you. In terms of where we are with the government, clearly I've been continued to have conversations with the civil servants. The latest position that I was given towards the end of last week is that they're still progressing and working on it. So we are still waiting for a response. I have, I probably didn't need to do this, but I did highlight to the MHCRG officials that we do need a decision before the end of February, because that impacts on the auditor's ability to sign off our 24-25 accounts. It is a matter of subjective judgment whether the capitalisation direction request for the Western Link we've asked for falls within the parameters of exceptional financial support or not, but leaving that as a rather moot point. It wouldn't surprise me if the government is considering all of those, and we should get hopefully we will get a decision before too much longer, sometime in February. The government is very well aware of the civil servants that we do need a decision before end of February. In terms of how the impact when this has been reported through to members, so it's quite a bit of a technical bit, but it doesn't impact on the at this stage in setting the 27 budget, other than it is a risk that the government doesn't approve it, the capitalisation direction request, and if that happens, we've set out a process of how we will address it and deal with it, which broadly, as the Chair has said, is that sounds very response I gave last time, where we did this a year ago. The only thing that's changed is we have got certainty of what the amount is and the accounting treatment, which is all reflected in the 24-25 Statement of Accounts, as it's required to be. That has gone through the Audit and Governance Committee, and that was signed off by that committee on the 15th of January, and at that committee the external auditors said that they were content with the accounting approach and also the calculation of that impairment. So in terms of governance and process, we've gone through everything. We are just literally waiting for the government to make the decision, and clearly I'm in their hands as to when they're going to make that decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Back to you, Councillor Murphy.
Thank you, Chair. Well, my worry is that we're right against the wire, and we're being asked to look at a budget with basically a £35 million sort of Damocles hanging over it. The reason why we've got a £35 million sort of Damocles hanging over it is because there was no contingency against the failure of the Western Link in the first place. Now we have no contingency against the failure of the council to get the government to agree to issue a capitalisation directive. So one way or another, we're waiting for the government either to bail us out or for a pretty dreadful impact on our budget. And we have nothing before us and nothing going to council which explains any of that in any detail, but we're going to be expected to approve the budget. I have a real problem with that.
So glad that we avoid political fisticuffs in scrutiny. Councillor Morphew.
Sorry, where's the political fisticuffs?
Sorry, Councillor Morphew. We're not doing political fisticuffs. Councillor Jameson.
Making totally unsubstantiated statements in relation to the Norwich Western Link, I think it was fairly political. So the capital direction was requested from your government in June. So I think you need to go talk to your government as to why it's taking so long. Harvey has, Mr. Bullen has made clear that it is likely that we receive an answer to what this technical accounting treatment is before the end of the month. But it has absolutely nothing to do with your government have encountered in relation to one department in favour of a transport scheme that another is against. So that we were just in the middle of that argument. I'd also push back on a couple of other things in relation to the idea that putting the recovery grant was a good thing and it puts money where it should be. I mean, in relation to this county, it is really important that this committee realises that the non-council tax increase in core spending power for future years is sharply lower. So in this current year, 25-26, the non-council tax increase is about 24.5 million. It falls to 14 million in the year that we're discussing, 26-27. It falls to 3.6 in 27-28, and for the continuing authority, they will have 2.9. So the government is giving rural areas very little indeed. Everything is now loaded on council tax.
Thank you. I think just picking up on Councillor Morphew's point, just in terms of, regardless of where it's come from, a £35 million risk exists, and whether or not that should be accounted for or some narrative around that within the budget that we're setting, and whether it's acceptable for that not to be happening, I think is the nub of the question that's being asked. Harvey.
So, I was going to say the risk is accounted for in terms of the budget because I'm required to comment on it within the Section 25 statement, and I have done so. So there is a narrative around it. The reality is I can't just magic the risk away because I'm waiting for a response from government. So the risk is recognised in the budget process. As I said, it is not a direct impact on the 26-7 budget because it has to be accounted for and dealt with within the 24-25 account. So that's where it is difficult because it is straightforward. It is a 24-25 accounting issue, but we are depending on government to make a decision, and there's not much more I can add to that. Clearly, if I hadn't commented on it, then I would agree with you that that's a significant risk that has not been highlighted, but clearly I have, so therefore members are aware of it, but it is like a lot of things, until governments have made decisions on some of the things, we are at risk. And I would say until Monday, the send risk was a far bigger risk than Norwich Western Link. Now, clearly, we've had some good news on the send position, and the level of risk that we were facing has reduced significantly because of the final settlement announcement. And, I cannot call which way the government's going to jump with this, but hopefully the government will make a decision shortly. They do know the timescales. They will prevent us meeting their timescales they've set for us shortly. So you would like to think they would make a decision on that and let us advance to that deadline that they've set us. But we are in their hands, and I have, as you would expect me to, reminded them of a deadline and that we would like an answer before then. But I am in their hands. I cannot force them or make them make a decision because it's outside my gift. But the risk, in my view, is fully reflected in the budget papers that you need to consider. But as I said, nobody can make the risk go away until the government has made a decision. Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification. One more, Councillor Morphew.
I've got another issue, if I may, but I mean, I think I've had confirmation that there is no contingency and whatever Councillor Jameson would like to say and make politics out of it. I mean, the reason why we're here is that there was no contingency against failure of the Western Link, whatever the causes of it were. So that's why we're here. I want to go back to the care estate as well in a different format because, as I understand it, whilst decisions in principle have been made on the care estate, and clearly there is an expectation, and I know there are some figures below the line, at the moment there is no expectation or included in the budget of what the impact of the disposal of the care estate will have on either the capital or revenue programme. Can you tell me why not?
Because it's an in-principle decision and the final numbers are not available. So how could we put them in? The intelligent thing to do is not to make assumptions at this stage.
I think it would be not unreasonable to ask us to look at a working assumption, and you must have some sort of an assumption. And it does seem to me that, just referring back, you've made an assumption that the government are going to approve the capital direction, so you can make an assumption when it suits you, but not make an assumption when it doesn't.
I don't think those. Once again, I think you're conflating two totally separate issues, and it creates a utterly false impression to do so.
Go on, one more, Councillor Moore, for you.
I'm just going to shrug my shoulders and say, hang on a minute. Look, we got one sort of set of rules when it suits you on one side, and then you've decided to disapply them when it suits you on the other side. I really, how can you say that a budget has got that sort of the sufficient integrity when, I mean, okay, it might be accountancy savvy, but from a political point of view, and explain it, and trying to explain to people out there what the hell it is we're agreeing to, I'm really, good luck, mate.
So I think everyone would take a non-political view of this and would completely concur that it would be utterly irrelevant to put supposition figures into a budget when we don't know what those numbers should be in relation to North Care when the transaction has not completed and those numbers are not in place. And that is totally separate and totally different from a technical accounting treatment of the issue in relation to the Norwich Western Link. Completely different, and you are mischievous in conflating the two, Councillor.
I'm going to draw a line there, and I'm going to move on to Councillor Kemp.
Thank you, Chair. And I've got a number of points to raise, some of the savings in the budget. And the first one, it appears to be that you're taking £250,000 out of the development work for the A17 pullover roundabout, which is very necessary as a gateway to King's Lynn to relieve congestion. Could you tell me why you're doing that and the impact that's going to have on development and prosperity in King's Lynn? That's the first one. The second one is about reviewing high-cost care packages with a view, it seems, to increasing the cost for residents. Isn't that going to put more pressure on unpaid carers, which is exactly what we don't want to do because it could force more people into a residential care setting? I would like some detail on that. Also, the transport savings home to school. You've got three proposals, one which is includes taking away discretionary funding for transport to school. You've said they need to be consulted more and you've removed the savings from the budget, but what's the status of those at the moment? Are they going to be put back in? And then I've got two more, if I may.
We'll take those ones first. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor. So first of all, pullover roundabout. Yes, I share with you the regret that the government, the Department of Transport, was not supportive of our bid to develop the pullover roundabout. I agree with you that it is much needed. It has come out of this proposal, but it has not been lost overall. That is still within the long-term ambitions of the highways team, and it was discussed, in fact, at the board, the West Norfolk Transport Liaison Committee, which I set up some years ago. As we went through the long list of issues in that we very much that was focused on, and furthermore, it was noted there that the pullover roundabout and work on the A149 are by far the two most significant things which a consultation shows people want. So we will continue to work hard on the government to get that scheme done, and indeed I think at that committee it was agreed that we would redo the proposals on the pullover roundabout in order that we facilitate that. The review of the high-cost care packages, this came up as part of Mr. Wake's presentation to the Communities Committee, Select Committee, and the detail there is really with him rather than with me, but it does not impact on unpaid carers. It's merely looking at those high cost packages and how they can best be delivered. Transport savings within homeschool transport. I mean, I just remind the committee that homeschool transport costs us some £70 million a year, and it is beholden upon us to constantly look at ways in which we can ameliorate that insofar as we possibly can. And this particular saving was one of those methods, and I'm not ashamed, quite to reverse. I think it's really important that the Children's Services look constantly at ways of keeping that bill under control. When I first started doing this job, I think it was under 30 million. I would have to come back to you, to be honest with you, on the consultation and where we sit with that at the minute.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And the other 2 points are about adult learning. There's a saving which says it would have to pay for itself out of the income, but isn't that going to be a disadvantage because some of the groups that are in most need of help can't afford to pay? So doesn't that really defeat the object? Also, there's the Boost project in West Norfolk, which helps young people in need of employment training or upskilling. And isn't that going to affect that budget too, whereby county council officers help those young people with bespoke courses? I think that's really, really important. And the second is about libraries. There are new libraries being built, but the budget for books and for resources is decreasing. Doesn't that sort of, it's the opposite of what should be happening? You have new buildings, but less in them.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor. So, adult learning. I mean, I just would like to, at this point, pay credit to the adult learning team here at Norfolk County Council because of the way in which we are delivering that service and the amount, the GCSEs that are coming through. I think it's a really excellent service and it's well managed, and I'm really comfortable with that. The way in which it is delivered will not be significantly different, and I do not believe that it will affect Boost or the upskilling. It's an incredibly important part of what we intend to deliver on adult learning. So I don't think that there will be a significant effect. I don't think that we will be cutting, making people pay who can't afford it is not the reason for doing that. And you're right, we are delivering new libraries. I'm really proud that the library in Great Yarmouth is up and running, and that we shortly be opening the library in King's Lynn. But of course, although I think it's important to maintain the word library, it is much more, of course, than that in terms of a community hub. And there is an awful lot that will be going on in the new library that doesn't or cannot go into into the existing one, and so that facility is really important. And I think, you know, there is no doubt, and we here, the Mr. Administration, be the first to acknowledge that that books are, if you like, the root of any library. It's got to be the heart of any library. But there are so many more facilities that are absolutely vital to put, not just in those two big libraries I mentioned, not just in the Forum, but in all the 47 libraries that this administration has kept open, despite the exigencies of the sort of cuts that we are being forced to maintain, as there are as so little central government money comes our way. Actually, I've just been pointed out to me that we are it's a technical reason on the budget, on the books. We're uncapitalising some of the library book stock budgets, which will have a small effect. But that is all that's happening there.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Councillor Elmer.
Thank you very much, Chair. Harvey, just going back to the theme that Councillor Price and Councillor Morphew were going down. Obviously, when you set out this budget, you have set out commentary and provisions for certain risks that may or may not materialise. Since you began this process, you've had clarity on what you have said was the largest risk of those, which is the higher needs block grant or accumulated deficit. What is your view now on this authority's medium-term borrowing capabilities, given what you know today versus what you knew this time last week?
Okay, thank you for that. I think what that does, the announcement on the send and the funding, as I've already said, we've clearly got a number of processes and steps to go through. What it does, it has the impact of not necessarily changing our borrowing to fund the capital programme. What it does, it replenishes cash balances that, in essence, we have had to find in order to fund the deficit to date. What I'd made the comment in the Section 25 statement was that the County Council could continue to fund the deficit up until March 2027, and without change, the Council would not be in a position to continue to cash flow the send deficit. So what this announcement does by the government for Norfolk, and it's not just Norfolk, but it will be applied equally to other councils across the country, on the basis that the government pays the 90% deficit as at March 26, it will enable the County Council not to have a problem in terms of the level of cash balance it needs to run the organisation beyond 31st of March 27, which clearly we would need to have addressed in some shape or form in any event. So if the government haven't done anything, we'd probably have to say to the government, you need to do something before that date, because if not, we cannot basically continue to put it very bluntly, we cannot continue to borrow for a debt on behalf of the government, because that, in essence, is what we've been doing to date in respect of send. But clearly the government has started to address that. There is still some uncertainty, because what the government has said is that they're addressing it in phases. So the first phase is a deficit as at March 26, which I know we haven't got to yet, but we've got a reasonable idea of what that level of deficit will be, and we will get that confirmed. I'm sure the government will want us to confirm that level of debt to them, but then they will work out a grant allocation to us, and providing, as others have already commented on, we produce a plan that is acceptable to the government, but it's not just us that have to produce the plan. The plan that also has to involve health and the wider education sector as well. So providing we meet the requirements of the DFE and they sign off our plan, we will get that cash reimbursed to us, or that 90% reimbursed to us in the autumn. That will mean that the County Council will be able to carry on functioning and deliver what it needs to in 27-28. And then, without wishing to go back to where some of the comments are, that will then take us to the position where we will have a new authority, or should have authorities, depending on what the government decides regarding LGR. So it doesn't give us more flexibility, it takes away a risk and give us a mechanism of dealing with the cash flow requirements for the County Council for 27A, which we didn't have beforehand. Sorry, that's quite a technical and long answer, but it basically means the County Council can continue to function while it exists before we get to LGR.
Okay, that hopefully lets me go on to a more political question for Andrew and Kay, and then I've got another technical one if you're happy. On the subject of the LGR costs, given that Norfolk didn't vote for local government reorganisation and it wasn't articulated in the government's manifesto, would the Cabinet member and leader agree with me that whatever the outcome may be, the costs of implementation should be borne by central government and not by the residents of Norfolk? So that's my more political question. My more technical one, and this is a bugbear from when I was last on the scrutiny committee, is around our treasury management strategy. And I'm going to ask Harvey if he thinks that our treasury management policy is, and I'm going to use a phrase I never thought I would before, too conservative, given that we are currently restricting our overseas investments to AA plus countries only. I appreciate this is a holding over from the 2008 financial crisis, but my point would be that our treasury management policy is so conservative that we would not invest in the UK if it was an overseas country at the moment, given that we have an AA credit rating rather than AA plus.
Who wants to go first?
I mean, on the capacity funding for LGR and devolution, we knew devolution was in the manifesto. We will get capacity funding for that. It's very disappointing that there isn't anything for LGR, which means that all 8 councils have basically got to find the money for the reorganisation, which is going to be quite a considerable cost in order to reorganise. And we didn't see that coming because it wasn't anything that we knew about before it was suddenly announced. So it is regrettable. I don't know what the exact costs are. I think we've got some idea, and maybe Harvey can let us know what we think those costs are going to be for reorganisation. And they're going to be much higher if we have 3 councils than if we have 2, for example.
Okay, so in terms of local government review and the costs, yes, we've set out various costs in the business cases, or business case for the County Council, and then the districts have set out their proposals as well. As the leader said, it is going to cost a lot of money. I think what I would also say is that things will have already have changed since those bids were put in. So in reality, once we get the Minded to decision, we're actually going to have to reassess everything again, and then we'll come up with some new figures. So to some extent, we need the Minded to decision to be able to determine that. What the government has been very clear on, so far anyhow, is that it expects local areas to pay for those transition costs. So, I would like the government to pay, but I'm not expecting it, and they've been very clear on that. In terms of a treasury management strategy, I understand the point, and yes, we could have a different treasury management approach, and one that arguably is less conservative with a small c. I think there's a degree of history here from because the County Council got caught out. I sort of say, if I use that language, it's probably the wrong language to use, but was invested in Icelandic banks, and that I think has made people understandably a little bit cautious on that. In the short term, because of the level of DSG deficit that County Council is having to fund, the council does not have actually that much cash to invest. So I take on board the point, and yes, we could have a different strategy, but at the moment, reality is we're needing all the cash we've got to be able to service that deficit. That position will change, hopefully in the autumn when we get a reimbursement, the grant that the government is intending to pay to local authorities with SEND deficits. The only issue will be is the level of SEND deficits that's likely to occur for 26 and 27, 28 will, if we're not careful, will almost put us back to the position we're in now. And again, until we know more from what the government is, it's only at that stage when all this has been worked through the system, will we possibly be back in a position where we have reasonable levels of cash balances that we can actually invest. So I appreciate that's not necessarily the answer you wish to hear, but in very simple terms, we don't have the cash balances to make wider investments at this moment in time because we're having to fund that SEND deficit. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Proctor.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Councillor Jones has made some good points and strong points earlier on about the various issues, particularly around council tax. And I think that risk that we've got to fund so much of the CSP through council tax in the future is not just ours, but it's going to be the new councils as well. So let's be aware of that. The point really sort of comes down to, on council tax, certainly on the consultation, you can see how people were not minded to be interested in anything beyond that 5%, which is an effective form of telling us, make sure you can live within your means and make sure it's only 5% in terms of the increase. Not like Worcestershire, I think they're on 9%, but the government have agreed with that. The thing I just wanted to make a point about was we are putting a fair bit of emphasis on savings through transformation. Now, there is some commentary about transformation, but given that we are talking about transformation quite a fair bit, I think we ought to see a bit more detail about what the savings actually are from transformation in such a way that we can say, yes, we've done this and this is a result of it. But more importantly, not just now, but the future depends on the transformation savings as well. Now, it may well be in the detail in there, but perhaps it's not as readily accessible and prominent as it could be in terms of transformation.
But I note the comment, Councillor. It's well made, and I'll look to see how we can improve that and to make that more clear in the future, because it is absolutely fundamental to the effective running of this council and to achieving a robust and balanced budget that the savings and the sort of savings that and changes that both children's and adults are making, and that do come to the relevant select committee, of course, but making the ones that are making are fundamental to us actually stitching a budget together. So I think your point is well made, that we will perhaps think how we can put that more clearly in the budget papers. Do you want to add anything to that?
Okay, thank you. Councillor Long.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. We've had a bit of politics here this morning, this afternoon, wherever we're at now. Here we are. I've got some questions or points about the findings of the public consultation, so some actual scrutiny rather than some political argy-bargy. I mean, it's extensive, and it's great to see the responses that are there. I mean, obviously there's, some people say it's too much, some people say it's too little, some say we want, what we're doing in children's services is great, and what we need more adults care, and, and then the next breath, the next comment says, I don't agree with the council tax increase. So it's hard to pick the bones out of this particular fish dish, reading through all the comments, and I just wonder, and this is really the crux of my question, I mean, there are specific ones relating to my select committee, Children's, Families, Communities. And do the public who respond, if they put an email address or something at the bottom, do they get any response to the particular questions that they've raised? Because some of them do, the comments that they're making be either ill-informed, misinformed. I know it's their take on things, but actually sometimes it would be better that people had a bit of help or advice. And if they really are in the position that they're struggling to pay their bill now and it's going to be harder going forward, guidance towards where there are, where the districts obviously have schemes that help certain groups of people, low incomes, over 65s and so on. Because reading between the lines of this, actually, the public need to understand better more of what we do, how we do it, and what help there is available to them. So that was basically, if you include the email, does that happen? The other thing I would say about the consultation response, I really don't get why there are questions asked in any of these responses of things about demographics. You know, because it doesn't matter whether you're old, young, disabled, you know, what your race is, the bill comes through the door. And the services are provided to everybody. And whether that's just somebody saying, oh yes, we've got to do that, it's box ticking, but actually the other part of it is for me the far more important part, what the public perception is of what we're doing and why. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor. You make some points. I mean, you know, how do we make the breakdown of council tax clearer? I think that's a really interesting. I mean, I did look at another local authority that had the whole thing done as a sort of restaurant bill. And I thought that was a rather clever idea, but it was very much frowned upon by the leader at the time, I have to say. But that was one idea. But you know, I think it probably wouldn't have answered the whole question, which is you know, it doesn't really make it clear. But how do we make it clearer is, I think, a useful thing for us to go away and think about. And you know, what help is available to residents on receipt of the council tax is probably a very good idea. In terms of consultation, I don't think it's a statutory thing, but you know, the whole question of demographics is, I don't think it's a box ticking. It is generally asked in consultation when in whatever format, and I suppose that it is useful intel. You know, if the demographic does tie up with and tie in with the particular comments that a resident might have. So I would generally be in favour of that as continuing, but you know, reasonably ambivalent about it.
Yes, thank you. That's helpful. I think just for to help the public, you know, if they're listening to this because they submitted to the consultation process, you know, I would say that some of the issues that they are raising, and also some of the issues that we've spoken about earlier with the funding, government announcement on SEND funding, etc., will be being addressed at the Select Committee for Children's, Families and Communities going forward. And I would urge adults and so on to do the same in their spheres of operation, so that the public do get a better understanding of what we do and why. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we'll take that one as a rhetorical question, and I think nobody will disagree with that. Okay, councillors, the only other indication I have is from Councillor Price.
Okay, thank you. I'll be quick. I think picking up the demographics is a good way for the council to understand that it's actually reaching out to the wider Norfolk community, and so it's understanding that it's targeting its process of consultation correctly. So that kind of information is absolutely essential feedback and shouldn't really be questioned. So that's just feedback on that point. I want to pick up on what the finance officer said, and it's in relation to the points that were raised about the Western Link earlier. We have that liability, that risk that will either be capitalised or not. We also have this sort of aged, crumbling, you know, residential care property asset that we own, which we are going through a process of offloading. I think it's absolutely right that the finance officer has said that this is an accounting issue for the 24-25 accounts. With my audit hat on, it becomes quite clear to me that that should be highlighted in your annual governance statement. So I went online to have a quick look. It's good practice by SIPFA to identify your weaknesses, where you've got potential, you know, risks, and whether or not you've mitigated them well or not. And I've spent a lot of work on the Norwich AGS just recently, improving that. So I've looked on the website and I see that the accounting period was supposed to be June through till 8th of August. So if the officer can confirm whether or not that accounting period has actually concluded and whether or not the draft AGS for the 24-25 period has now been finalised or not, because it's not, I can't find it readily on the website, why those risks of the aged residential care and the financial risk around the Western Link are not included in the AGS. And if that accounting period hasn't been adjusted, then I would like to recommend that ultimately that this committee recommends to audit that those are inserted in with good practice from SIPFA. To respond about the Treasury Management point from Councillor Elmer as well, so this is a second separate point, so it's is that at Norwich we identified the risk that Treasury Management really wasn't getting scrutiny at the council, and then we set up a Treasury Management Committee which involved the Chair of Scrutiny, the Chair of Audit and the Finance member, so that this wider conversation about AAA or not AAA or ethical investments could be had in a way where there was some oversight of it. So again, my ignorance around the subject here is that I don't think there is a Treasury Management Committee here that involves other members, or you know, you can explain that to me, and you can explain why Councillor Elmer is not taking it to that area. So AGS points about that, SIP for good practice, and your Treasury Management monitoring. Thank you.
Just a quick point of personal explanation, Chair. It's more just because it popped into my head then.
Okay, it's probably easier to do the second one first, so I'll do that one first. The County Council does have a Treasury Management panel, so it's not a committee, but it is a panel made up of members, and therefore there is an opportunity for members to have those conversations. And I appreciate you've got to be on there to have it, but it does exist, so that's that one. In terms of the AGS and the accounts, the very simple answer is that if the government grants the capitalisation direction, it all goes away, because there is no weakness, because the issue will have been dealt with from an accounting matter. The audit committee, when it met on the 15th of January, did consider this, and it was made clear, it's clear in the papers, and it's also clear from the responses for the external auditors, is that they will be satisfied with our accounts and the annual governance statement, provided the government grants capitalisation direction. If they do not do that, which is a question that you're probably asking, is we will have to change and redo the accounts to comply with that. So to some extent, I don't think referring it back to the Audit and Governance Committee is actually helpful, because they've already considered it, they know what the position is, and as I say, it will get resolved one way or another when the government makes its decision on the council's request.
Okay, I think the question's been answered, Councillor Price. Thank you for that. Okay, I have just one small question myself, which I'll just raise. Just on in terms of page 27 of the report are the additional proposals which came forwards in December and January, so won't have gone out to any kind of public consultation. Are we confident that none of those will trigger any need for an in-year consultation in order for them to be delivered?
Yes, we are, yeah.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask that question. Thank you. All right, committee, we have been at this for some time, and what we were asked to do is to consider and comment on the suite of 26 to 27 budget reports presented to Cabinet on the 26th of January as appended to this report, with particular focus on the Cabinet recommendations to County Council in relation to the Norfolk County Council Revenue Budget 26-27, Medium-Term Financial Strategy 26-30, and the Capital Strategy and Programme 26-30. It feels like we've done that. Are we content that we've done that, committee? We agree. Thank you very much, which just leaves us with the Forward Work Programme, and over to you, Mr. Hoffer.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to be incredibly brief, as this has been a long meeting. There are just 2 points to ask committee. It was flagged at a previous meeting that it would be good to have a work programming session to look at what's coming down the track. I would like committee to give a steer on whether or not after the meeting on 18th of March might suit for that purpose, and obviously can go through the work programme in a bit more detail at that point. Just looking to round if that's okay. Yeah. Fab. There was just, on that topic, the committee also explored the possibility of an extra meeting to discuss fire and trading standards scrutiny, whether or not we'd need to sort of book an additional meeting for that. We've got two options. One would be to potentially extend 18th of March's meeting or programme in a meeting for April. The date that we could be looking at is the 22nd of April. I just wanted to get committee's views on whether there's a preference for either of those two options, then I can take that forward accordingly.
From the Chairman's point of view, my own preference would be that we do programme a meeting in, because it's much more difficult to find a date later on if we need it than to have one already in the diary just in case. And I'm particularly thinking about the twists and turns of how LGR might come upon us. There might be some sense in at least having a date in the diary for April, even if it's not fully populated. But Councillor Long might be about to disagree with me. Okay, different point. So what are our thoughts? Do we stretch 18th of March longer, or do we programme in 22nd of April? I have a mutter from my Vice Chairman, 22nd of April meeting. Councillor Price?
I think it's wise, prudent to build in another date. There's going to be a set of by-elections. There's going to be some, political restriction going on across the county. It's inevitable. We've already had one announcement of that. Should it not just come in May? Why April? We could be politically restricted in that month.
Thank you, Councillor Price. So my understanding is anything that's business as usual, which this would be, could still be carried out by the committee. The reason why there's the request for the April meeting was based on a concern last time at the last meeting that there wouldn't be enough time to give fire scrutiny justice. So that's where this has come from.
Okay, committee, any disagreement with a meeting in April? No, so we'll go ahead and we'll programme that meeting in April. Councillor Long.
Yeah, just thinking about forward work items that we could consider. I mean, it's raised by Councillor Elmer about our sort of appetite for risk in terms of, and he said we were very conservative on our sort of investment strategies. Is that something that the committee could consider? And the reason I say could we consider it, risk appetite on investments. Yes, he mentioned Iceland, but prior to this council having investments in Iceland and what happened, certain money-saving expert was advising folk to put money into Iceland because the interest rates were so much better, and I won't name names, but a certain money-saving expert was, and it's historical, it's shown on TV, clips at the time. Is that an item we could consider, and is this the right committee to consider that? Because ultimately we're here to not just hear what's going on, but also to drive policy development. And actually we may make recommendations when hearing the risks and hearing that we're perhaps not as conservative as we thought we were. Just a thought, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Long. So if it's all right with you, I'll pick that one up with our finance officer, and we'll discuss which committee, whether it's this one or audit and governance, which best committee that could come to, and we'll take that forward. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Subject to those changes then, are we content with the forward work programme? We are indeed, in which case meeting is closed. Thank you very much indeed.